The broth tasted like salt and disappointment. I slurped the last of the cheap noodles directly from the styrofoam cup, the plastic fork scraping the bottom. On the phone screen, perched against my knee, a spreadsheet glowed with malicious intent. Another column of numbers that didn't add up, another deadline breathing down my neck. The hum of the old refrigerator was the only other sound in my apartment, a constant, low-grade companion. I sighed, tossing the empty cup onto the coffee table next to a graveyard of its brethren. God, I need a better lock, I muttered to the empty room. This building's getting sketchy. The words hung in the air for a second, then vanished. I picked up my phone, my thumb swiping away the spreadsheet from hell. And there it was, plopped right in the middle of my social feed, a slick video ad. A chrome and black smart lock, the X-Lock Pro. A disembodied hand demonstrated its keyless entry, its remote lockdown feature, its unbreakable build. ITSKED, a sour taste in my mouth that had nothing to do with the noodles. Jesus Christ, I mumbled, scrolling past it with unnecessary force. The phone's always listening. Goddamn parasites. I didn't give it another thought. It was just the world we lived in. Annoying, but normal. I heaved myself off the sofa, my joints popping in protest. Time to face the music, or at least the bathroom sink. I took a step toward the hallway and stopped. My work shoes. I always, without fail, leave them on the shoe rack by the door. Side by side. A small, pointless ritual in a life that felt increasingly chaotic. But they weren't on the rack. They were in the middle of the living room floor. Not just misplaced. One was standing upright, perfect. The other was on its side, the sole facing the ceiling like a dead fish. I stared at them. A flicker of something went through my gut. A knot of confusion. I replayed the morning in my head. Woke up late. Rushed out. Did I kick them off without realizing? Must have. I was more of a zombie than a human before my first coffee. Brain dead, I said out loud, the sound of my own voice oddly loud in the quiet apartment. I walked over, picked them up, and placed them neatly on the rack. The leather felt cold. As I straightened up, I instinctively glanced at the front door. The deadbolt was thrown. The chain was on, exactly as I'd left it. It was fine. Everything was fine. I was just tired, letting my mind play tricks on me, a little jumpy. I shook my head, annoyed at myself, and continued toward the bathroom. The light in the bathroom was a harsh, unforgiving fluorescent that made my skin look pale and blotchy. I leaned over the sink, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water on my face. It was a shock to the system. Good. I needed to wake up. I grabbed a towel, rubbing my face dry, and then looked up at my reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror. And I froze. In the top right corner of the glass, just catching the light, was a smudge, a small, greasy smear of dark red. Lipstick. My heart didn't just drop, it stopped. A complete, total system failure for 1, 2, 3 seconds. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass around the mark. It wasn't just red. It was a deep, wine-colored red. Faint, as if someone had tried to wipe it away but missed a spot. I live alone. The thought wasn't a thought, it was a thunderclap in my skull. I haven't had a girlfriend in over a year. No one, absolutely no one, has been in this apartment for weeks except me. My mind scrambled, trying to find a reason. A logical explanation. Had I brushed up against someone on the subway? Maybe it was on my coat. Then I touched my face, then the mirror. No, it was a clear, distinct smear. The kind left by a mouth. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed me in the chest. I backed away from the sink, my eyes wide, scanning the tiny bathroom. The shower curtain was pulled shut. Behind it? I lurched forward, yanked the curtain back with a violent rip of plastic rings. Nothing. Just white tile and a bottle of shampoo. My breath came in ragged gasps. The door. I stumbled out of the bathroom, my bare feet slapping against the cold floorboards, and practically threw myself at the front door. The deadbolt was still in place. The chain was still secure. I rattled the knob. Solid. Locked from the inside. It was impossible. No one could have gotten in, no one could have gotten out. So what the hell was that in the mirror? Hedrits. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, trying to force my lungs to work properly. Get a grip, Leo, I whispered. It's a stain, it's ink from a pen or something. You're losing it. But the lie was thin and brittle. I knew what lipstick looked like. Every man knows what lipstick looks like. My whole apartment, my small sanctuary from the world, suddenly felt wrong. Watched. The familiar shadows in the corners looked deeper, darker. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, waiting. My phone buzzed on the sofa. The sound shot through me like a jolt of electricity. I jumped, spinning around to face it. It buzzed again, the screen lighting up the dim living room. An unknown number. A text message. My feet felt like lead, but I forced them to move. I crept toward the sofa, my eyes locked on the glowing screen. I leaned over. My blood ran cold. The message was just 4 words. Like my lipstick? I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat, a hard, painful lump. I scrambled backward, tripping over the coffee table and landing hard on the floor. The phone was a venomous thing lying on the cushion, a beacon of pure terror. It knew. Whatever sent that, it knew. It was watching me right now. My mind went into overdrive. A camera? Did they hack my laptop camera? I looked at the little black dot on my laptop. It was dark. A prank? Who would do this? It was too specific. The shoes. The lipstick. The text. This wasn't random. Fight or flight. My body chose flight. I scrambled to my feet. My only thought to get out. Get out of the apartment. I ran to the window, the one overlooking the street, 5 floors below. I fumbled with the blinds, yanking the cord so hard they clattered open with a deafening rattle. I pressed my face to the glass, scanning the sidewalk. A couple walking a dog, a lone figure jogging under the orange glow of the streetlights, headlights sweeping past. Nothing. No one looking up, no one out of place, just the city, oblivious. It was a game. A sick game of cat and mouse, and I was the mouse trapped in a box that was getting smaller and smaller. They weren't breaking the door down. They didn't need to. They were already inside my head. My chest was tight. I couldn't breathe. I backed away from the window, my gaze darting around the room, from the door to the dark hallway leading to my bedroom. Was someone here? Hiding? In the closet? Under the bed? The very air felt thick with a hostile presence. Every shadow was a potential shape. Every creak of the old building was a footstep. Minutes passed. 5. 10. I stood frozen in the center of the room, listening. The only sound was the frantic, hammering beat of my own heart in my ears. The refrigerator hummed. A siren wailed in the distance. Normal sounds that now felt like a fragile shield against an encroaching silence. Finally, a sliver of rationality returned. Anger. Hot, white anger started to burn through the fog of fear. A prank. It had to be a sick, twisted prank. Some hacker asshole who got my number. I was going to block them. Report them. I was going to take back control. I walked toward the sofa, my steps deliberate, fists clenched. I would not be terrorized in my own home. I snatched the phone from the cushion. My thumb, slick with sweat, unlocked the screen. I opened my messages, ready to find that number, to block it into oblivion. I stared. The message wasn't there. The chat history with the unknown number was gone. Completely. Not just deleted. It was as if it had never existed. My thumb moved with a life of its own. Swiping. Tapping. I went to my recent call log. Empty. No unknown numbers. No record of anything. The screen in my hand was clean. A perfect, digital blank slate. The air left my lungs in a rush. I stood in the middle of my living room, staring at the phone, the world shrinking down to that single, impossible fact. The message was gone. The proof was gone. There was only me, the lipstick smudge in the bathroom, and the sickening, absolute certainty that I was not alone. And whoever it was, they could do anything they wanted. They could write on my reality, and then erase the ink. Sleep wouldn't come. My eyes were gritty, burning from staring at the dark ceiling. My heart was still doing a frantic, twitchy drum solo against my ribs, a leftover from the message, the lipstick, the impossible vanishing act. My apartment, my 150 square feet of sanctuary, felt contaminated. Every shadow was wrong. Every normal nighttime creak of the building was a footstep. I lay flat on my back, rigid, listening so hard my ears hurt. Then, a new sound. From above. Scrap. Thump. Drag. I squeezed my eyes shut. A low growl rumbled in my chest. You've got to be kidding me. Someone was moving furniture. Heavy furniture. The sound was a low, grating torture, the legs of a dresser or a heavy table being dragged across a bare wood floor. Drag. Scrape. Thud. 1 in the morning. 1 a.m. and some asshole decides it's prime time for redecorating. I pictured it. Some college kid who just moved in, no concept of time or neighbors. Or worse, a couple having a fight, shoving the sofa against a wall. The anger was a welcome feeling. It was solid. Normal. It tasted better than the cold dread that had been sitting in my stomach for the last hour. Fucking asshole, I muttered into my pillow. I rolled onto my side, pulling the thin blanket over my head. My attempt to muffle the sound was useless. The scraping vibrated right through the plaster, down into my mattress, into my bones. It was a physical violation. I tried to block it out. I thought about the spreadsheet from work, the one that glowed with pure evil. I thought about my bank account, a number so small it was basically a joke. I thought about anything besides the lipstick on the mirror and the ghost text on my phone. Anything besides the slow, methodical rearrangement of the world directly above my head. 10 minutes passed. The dragging continued, relentless. No pattern, just a series of agonizing scrapes and heavy thuds. I kicked the blanket off. My t-shirt was damp with sweat. It was no use. Sleep was a lost cause. My anger was starting to curdle back into something else. Something jumpy. Then, it stopped. Silence. A beautiful, perfect, absolute silence. I let out a long breath I didn't realize I was holding. Thank Christ. Maybe they were done. Maybe they'd finally passed out. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease for the first time all night. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet wash over me. It lasted for maybe 5 seconds. Thump. A single, distinct sound. Not a drag. Not a scrape. A thump. Clear and sharp. I waited. Thump. There it was again. A pause. Thump. A rhythm. Slow. Deliberate. Thump. 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 My brow furrowed. What the hell was that? It wasn't furniture. It was a bounce. The sound a heavy ball makes when it hits a wood floor. Like a basketball, the sound was coming from directly over my head. Right above my bed. Thump. 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 I sat up. The bed springs creaked loudly in the quiet room. My eyes were fixed on the stained white plaster of the ceiling. The rhythm didn't change. It was maddeningly steady, a metronome of unease. Thump, thump, thump. Wait, my mind, sluggish with fear and exhaustion, finally connected the dots. The apartment upstairs. 6B. That's not a college kid. It's Mrs. Gable. A little old lady, had to be in her 80s. I saw her maybe once a week, hauling a small cart of groceries from the bus stop. White hair, a permanent tremor in her hands. She lived alone. She had lived in that apartment for 40 years. Mrs. Gable was not bouncing a fucking basketball in her living room at 1 in the morning. My blood went cold. The rational explanation dissolved into smoke, leaving behind a hard, terrifying certainty. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. The sound wasn't just an annoyance anymore. It was an impossibility. The bouncing continued, each thud a hammer blow against my sanity. Who was up there? Had someone broken in? Was she okay? My mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. But none of them explained the text. None of them explained the lipstick. This was connected. It had to be. The sound was mocking me. Thump, thump, thump. It knew I was down here. It knew I was listening. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence crashed back in, heavier this time, louder. I stayed sitting up, frozen, straining to hear anything. A footstep. A cough. A scream. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge from the living room. My entire body was a coiled spring. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare breathe. My eyes were locked on the ceiling, waiting. My phone screen lit up the room. It was on the nightstand, face up. A jolt, pure and electric, shot through my spine. I flinched so hard I almost fell off the bed. I stared at the glowing rectangle, my heart trying to beat its way out of my throat. The same unknown number. A new message. It wasn't a text this time. It was a file. A video. It had already downloaded. A small play button pulsed in the center of the thumbnail. I couldn't move. The phone was a snake, coiled and ready to strike. My hand trembled as I reached for it. My thumb hovered over the screen. "Don't!" A voice in my head screamed at me. "Don't look! Throw it! Smash it!" But I had to know. I tapped the play button. The screen filled with a grainy black and white image. The angle was strange. High, looking straight down. It took my brain a second to process what I was seeing. It was my bedroom. It was me. The video showed me, lying in my bed, exactly as I had been moments before. A figure in a t-shirt, frozen, staring up. At the ceiling. At the camera. The quality was terrible, like a cheap security camera, but it was unmistakably me. My messy hair. The stupid band t-shirt I was wearing. The blanket kicked down by my feet. My breath hitched. A sound caught in my throat. A choked, wet gasp. Where? How? There was no camera on my ceiling. There was a smoke detector, that was it. Had they... Was it inside the smoke detector? The video was silent for a moment. The me on the screen was just a terrified statue. Then, the sound started. Not from the video. It came from my phone's tiny, tinny speaker, right next to my ear. Thump, thump, thump. The exact same sound. The rhythm. The pitch. The methodical, soul-crushing bounce. It wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from my phone. The video showed me flinching with each sound, proving it was recorded just moments ago. It was watching me react to a sound it was feeding me. It was a puppet master showing me the strings. It was in the room with me. Or it could see into the room. It could see me. It could hear me. It could project sound from God knows where and then send me a recording of my own terror. The circle of logic closed in on me. A perfect, inescapable trap. A scream tore from my throat. A raw, animal noise of pure horror. I didn't throw the phone. I batted it away with a violent swing of my arm. It flew across the room, hit the far wall with a sharp crack, and clattered to the floor, the screen finally dark. But I could still hear it. The sound. The bouncing. It wasn't real. It was in my head. Thump, thump, thump. I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet slapping on the cold wood floor. My legs were weak, shaking uncontrollably. Fight. The word blazed in my mind. Not flight. Not this time. No more cowering. No more being the mouse. Rage, white-hot and absolute, burned away the fear. I wasn't going to be toyed with. Not in my own home. I stormed to the closet, yanked the door open, my hands fumbling in the dark. My fingers closed around it. The old Louisville Slugger from my high school days. The wood was smooth. The bat heavy and solid in my grip. It felt real. It felt powerful. I was going upstairs. I didn't care who or what it was. A prankster. A stalker. A ghost. I was going to kick that door in, and I was going to smash whatever I found into a million pieces. I stalked out of the bedroom, the bat held high. My apartment looked alien, a hostile landscape of sharp angles and deep shadows. The front door was 10 feet away. An eternity. My every sense was on fire. I reached the door, my knuckles white on the bat. My hands shot out, unlatching the chain, twisting the deadbolt. The click of the lock was a gunshot in the silence. I yanked the door open, ready to charge into the hallway, ready for war, and I came face to face with a man. My heart stopped. I raised the bat, a yell dying in my throat. He held up his hands, his eyes wide. It was Frank, the night security guard. A paunchy guy in his late 50s with a tired face and a cheap, ill-fitting uniform. He was holding a large flashlight, the beam pointed at the floor. "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Mr. Leo, take it easy," he said, his voice a nervous whisper. "Jesus, what's going on?" I heard a scream. I stood there, panting, the bat still raised. My mind was a car crash of adrenaline and confusion. Frank. It was just Frank. He looked from the bat to my face, his expression a mixture of fear and concern. "The noise," I gasped, lowering the bat slightly. "Upstairs, apartment 6B. Banging, screaming. Something's happening up there." I pointed up at the ceiling with the bat. Frank's face changed. The concern deepened, but the fear was replaced by a deep, weary sadness. He shook his head slowly. "Son," he said, his voice gentle, "there's no one in 6B. "What are you talking about?" I snapped, my patience gone. "I heard them. They were moving furniture, bouncing a goddamn ball. Someone is in Mrs. Gable's apartment." Frank just looked at me, a deep, pitying look that made my skin crawl more than any video ever could. He took a slow breath. "Mr. Leo," he said, and the words dropped into the air like ice. "Mrs. Gable had a stroke on Tuesday. She passed away at the hospital last week." He paused, letting the words sink in. My grip on the bat went slack. "Her kids haven't even been by to clear the place out yet," he finished, his voice barely audible. "That apartment's been empty all week." My brain refused to process the words. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, a chunk of data so wrong it crashed the whole system. "Mrs. Gable. Dead. For a week." "No," I heard myself say, the word a dry rasp. "No, you're wrong. I saw her. I saw her last week." My mind scrambled, trying to find the memory. The grocery cart. The bus stop. When was that? Was that last week? Or the week before? The days were a gray blur of work and sleep. Frank's face was etched with a weary sympathy that made my stomach turn. "I was on duty when the paramedics came, Mr. Leo. It was her neighbor in 6C who called it in after not seeing her for 2 days. It was Tuesday, a week ago today. A week. The sounds, the dragging, the bouncing. My legs felt like they were made of sand. The heavy Louisville Slugger started to dip towards the floor. I was leaning on it like a crutch. Then who? What? The questions died in my throat. "Look, son," Frank said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "This building, it's old. You get pipes knocking, the wind howls through the window frames in a weird way. And you look like you haven't slept in a year. You heard a scream because you screamed. Your nerves are shot. Go inside, lock your door, get some sleep." He didn't believe me. He thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. Maybe this was it, the final snap, my brain inventing noises from an empty apartment to match the phantom lipstick on my mirror. It was a neater explanation than the alternative. I nodded dumbly, unable to form another sentence. I backed away from the door, pulling it shut. The heavy click of the deadbolt sounded final. The rattle of the chain latch was the sound of a cell door closing. I was locked in. Safe. A bitter laugh almost escaped my lips. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, listening to Frank's heavy footsteps fade down the hallway. Then, nothing. The silence was back. Complete. It pressed in on my ears. My apartment was a tomb. Sleep was out of the question. Frank was right about one thing. My nerves were shot to hell. I needed to do something. Something normal. Something to prove I was still in control of my own body, my own space. I walked to the kitchenette, my bare feet cold on the linoleum. The baseball bat was still in my hand. I placed it on the counter, where it sat like a coiled snake. My hands were shaking. I filled the kettle with water, the simple act feeling monumental. I set it on the stove and clicked the burner on. The hiss of the gas and the blue-orange bloom of the flame were comforting. Real. Tangible. While I waited for the water to boil, I stared out the small kitchen window. It was just a black rectangle, reflecting my own pathetic image back at me. Dark smudges under my eyes, oily hair plastered to my forehead. My jaw was clenched so tight my teeth ached. I looked like a junkie coming down from a 3-day bender. "Get it together, Leo," I whispered to my reflection. I blinked. A slow, tired blink. My reflection didn't. For a fraction of a second, a sliver of time so small I almost convinced myself it didn't happen, the man in the glass held my gaze, unblinking. And then, the corner of his mouth hooked upwards in a tiny, knowing smirk. I recoiled, a jolt running up my spine. My heart, which had just started to slow, kicked back into a frantic rhythm. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, forcing myself to look. There was just me. My own tired, scared face staring back. The smirk was gone. It had never been there. It was a trick of the light, a phantom of a sleep-deprived brain. It had to be. My logical mind screamed it at me. "You're exhausted. You're hallucinating. The stress is making you see things." I rubbed my eyes with the heels of my hands, hard, until I saw spots of color behind my eyelids. "You're losing it," I grunted, turning my back on the window. The kettle was starting to whistle. A normal sound. I reached for a mug. BZZZZZTKRRRSHHHHHHH. I froze. The sound came from the living room. The ugly, violent sound of a television snapping to life, filled with a blizzard of black and white static. My head whipped around. The old CRT television, a relic I kept for playing old video games, was glowing brightly in the dark living room, its static casting dancing shadows on the walls. I never left it plugged in. Ever. I was paranoid about power surges. As I stared, the static coalesced. The snow resolved itself into an image. It was grainy, black and white. A familiar, sickeningly high angle. It was a live feed from my laptop's webcam. The view was pointed directly at the worn-out armchair I always sat in. The chair was empty. My laptop was on the coffee table right in front of it, its lid open, just as I'd left it. The small white light next to the camera lens was on. My breath caught in my chest. It knows. It was watching. It was in my computer. Then, a voice came from the television speakers. It wasn't loud. It was a whisper. A dry, distorted digital sound like a recording of a snake hissing. "Don't turn your back on me." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had just turned my back on the window. On my reflection. My legs went weak and I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep from falling. My mind was a whirlwind of pure, screaming panic. It's in the house. It's here. It's not a ghost. It's not my imagination. It's real, and it's here. "Who are you?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "What do you want?" No answer from the screen. Just the silent, damning image of my empty chair. A live broadcast from my own living room, displayed for me like a threat. It was a demonstration of control. "See? I can see you. I'm in your technology. I'm in your home." Anger, hot and pure, surged through me, a primal response to the violation. I wasn't going to be a rat in its maze. I stormed from the kitchen, grabbing the baseball bat from the counter. My grip was so tight my knuckles were white. "Fuck you!" I roared at the glowing screen. I was going to smash the goddamn TV. I was going to smash the goddamn laptop. I was going to smash everything until this stopped. I stalked towards the television, raising the bat high over my shoulder. Just as I was about to swing, the image on the screen flickered. For one single, heart-stopping second, the view of the empty chair was replaced by a face. It filled the entire screen. A man's face, pale and waxy, staring directly out of the television. His eyes were wide, dark pits. His mouth was stretched into a horribly broad, cartoonish grin, showing too many teeth. It was a face from a nightmare, a mask of predatory glee. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The screen went black. A second later, white text appeared, typed out one letter at a time, like a message from an old computer. The cursor blinked. Guess where, IAM? The game wasn't about sounds from an empty apartment anymore. It wasn't about text messages. It was here. It was now. It was a game of hide and seek, and I was it. A sob of terror and rage escaped my throat. I didn't smash the TV. What was the point? The TV wasn't the threat. It was just a mouthpiece. I dropped the bat with a clatter and lunged for the wall socket, my fingers fumbling with the plug. I ripped the cord from the wall. The screen went dead, plunging the room back into darkness, lit only by the faint glow from the kitchen. But the text still burned behind my eyelids. Guess where, IAM? Where? Where could he be? The question hammered at my skull. In the closet? Under the bed? In the goddamn walls? I scrambled back, my eyes darting into every dark corner of my tiny apartment. Every shadow seemed to deepen, to shift, to hold a shape. My home wasn't a sanctuary. It was a hunting ground, and I was the prey. My gaze fell on the coffee table, on my laptop. The source, the eye that had been watching me. I ran to it, not to smash it, to close it, to blind it. I reached the coffee table, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grab the edge of the screen. And then I saw it, and all the air left my lungs. I always kept a small piece of black electrical tape over my laptop's camera. Always. It was a small, paranoid habit I'd picked up years ago. The tape was gone. It wasn't just gone. It had been carefully, deliberately peeled off. It was rolled into a tight, perfect little cylinder, and it was sitting right in the center of the keyboard. The small, rolled-up cylinder of black tape sat on the keyboard like a slug, a deliberate, mocking little trophy. My breath hitched. My lungs refused to work. I wasn't breathing in, wasn't breathing out. The world narrowed to that single, obscene object. The tape I had put over the camera. The tape someone else had taken off. Someone who was, or had been, close enough to my laptop to peel it off with a fingertip. My mind, a frantic animal in a cage, slammed against the bars of logic. When? When could it have happened? I worked from home. I hadn't had guests in months. The door was locked. I was here. I was always here. The only time I'd left today was to talk to Frank in the hallway. I was gone for maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes was all it took. This wasn't some hacker 1,000 miles away. This was close. This was physical. A new sound cut through my panic. A gentle tapping. Tap, 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 tap. It was the sound of rain against the window pane. The sky had finally opened up. Sheets of water were streaming down the glass, blurring the orange glow of the streetlights below. The wind howled, a low moan that rattled the old window frame. For a second, a stupid, insane second, I felt a flicker of relief. The storm was a shield. No one would be lurking outside in this. No one would be trying to get in. My feet moved on their own, carrying me away from the malevolent eye of the laptop. I went to the front door. My hand trembled as I checked the deadbolt. Locked. Solid. I checked the chain latch, secure in its metal track. The rain hammered against the building now, a roaring, constant drumbeat that drowned out the silence. It felt like a barrier. I was locked in. It was locked out. It had to be a prank. A sick, elaborate prank by some tech-savvy kid in the building who'd found a way onto my Wi-Fi. He'd hacked the TV, the laptop. He'd sent the texts. That was the only explanation that didn't shatter my sanity. The lipstick on the mirror? A hallucination. The noises from Mrs. Gable's apartment? The wind. The building settling. Frank was right. I was tired. I was on edge. The tape on the keyboard, maybe I'd taken it off myself to video chat with my sister last week and just forgot. Yes, that had to be it. My brain was seizing on anything, any detail. and twisting it into something terrible. "Just a bored kid," I whispered, the words swallowed by the storm. I leaned my forehead against the door, the wood cool against my hot skin. Just some asshole online. I stayed there for a long time, listening to the rain, letting the rhythm of it wash over me. It was a normal sound, a real-world sound. It was my anchor. My breathing slowly returned to something close to normal. The frantic thumping in my chest eased to a heavy pounding. I could handle a hacker. I changed my passwords, reset my router. I would get through this. Then I heard it. Plink. A single, metallic, drop-hitting tile. Plink. It came from the bathroom. My jaw tightened. "Damn it," I muttered, pushing off the door. I must have left the faucet dripping. In all the chaos, I'd left the damn sink dripping. Annoyance was a welcome change from terror. It felt normal. I strode towards the short hallway that led to the bathroom, the floorboards groaning under my feet. Plink. The sound was louder here. I pushed the bathroom door open. The little room was dark except for the sliver of light coming from the living room behind me. I reached in, my hand already knowing the shape of the faucet. My fingers closed around it. It was already shut. Bone dry, twisted as far as it would go. I froze. Plink. The sound came again. Sharp. Clear. It wasn't from the sink. I stood perfectly still, my entire body a listening device. My ears strained, trying to pinpoint the source. Plink. It was coming from above. I looked down. There, on the cracked white tile floor, was a small, dark circle of water, a tiny puddle, no bigger than a quarter. As I watched, another drop fell from the ceiling, landing in the center of the puddle with a soft plink. My eyes shot upward. Directly above the puddle was the metal grate of the ceiling vent, a dark, square hole of shadow. Water was dripping from it, from the ventilation shaft. My stomach dropped. A pipe must have burst in the walls. In this old, rotting building. That made sense. That was a logical, if expensive, problem. But the water wasn't clean. It wasn't the color of a leaking pipe. It was grayish, tinged with grime, carrying the scent of damp concrete and something else. Something earthy, like wet soil, or a flooded grave. I backed out of the bathroom slowly, my eyes still fixed on the dripping vent. This was wrong. This felt wrong. Back in the relative light of the living room, I tried to make my brain work. A broken pipe, that's all it is, a broken pipe and dirty water. But the water wasn't just in the bathroom. My gaze followed the floor out from the bathroom doorway. The puddle had an edge. And from that edge, another dark, wet shape was blooming on the old linoleum floor. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing. It was the distinct, perfect shape of a heel. Then, the arch of a foot. Then, the splayed shape of 5 toes. A footprint. A bare, wet footprint, appearing right before my eyes, as if soaking up from the floor itself. My blood ran cold. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just watched as, a foot ahead of the first print, another one began to form. A left foot this time. Heel. Arch. Toes. Soaking the linoleum a dark, dirty gray. An invisible trail. Leading from the bathroom. One step at a time. The sound of the rain outside was a distant roar. The only sound in the world was the hammering in my own ears and the soft plink. Plink from the bathroom. The footprints kept coming. A slow, deliberate procession. Past the entrance to my tiny galley kitchen. Out into the center of the living room. They were heavy, the prints of a large man. And they were filthy. I was paralyzed. My mind was screaming, a high, thin wail of pure disbelief. It was impossible. I was watching it happen. It was impossible. The prints continued their silent march across my floor. They passed the coffee table. They passed the spot where I had stood just moments ago. And then they stopped. The last footprint, a right foot, materialized on the worn rug just behind the sofa. Just behind where I was now standing. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. It was here. Something was standing right behind me. something wet and cold and invisible. I could feel it. A change in the air pressure. A sudden chilling drop in temperature at my back. I could smell the damp earth stench, stronger now. My muscles were locked. My neck was rigid. Turning around was the most terrifying thought I had ever had. If I turned, I would see nothing. Or I would see everything. I didn't know which was worse. My whole body trembled. Sweat beaded on my forehead and ran, cold, into my eyes. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Maybe it doesn't know you know. Maybe it will just go away. Shh. A sound. A soft, rustling sound, like wet fabric brushing against the coarse material of the sofa. It was less than a whisper, and it was directly behind my head. That was it. The wire snapped. Primal instinct took over. There was no thought, only a bolt of pure, unreasoning terror. My body moved before my brain could stop it. My hands shot out, grabbing the heaviest thing on the end table next to me. A thick ceramic vase filled with dried, dead flowers my mom had sent me for my birthday. It was heavy, solid. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat. In one single, desperate motion, I spun on my heel, swinging the vase with all my strength at the space where the sound had come from. My target was the empty air. My target was the source of the cold. My target was the thing that was not there. The vase flew from my hands, arced through the air, and smashed against the floor in a deafening explosion of ceramic and dust. White shards skittered across the rug and the linoleum, mixing with the dead petals. I was panting, my chest heaving, my heart trying to beat its way out of my ribcage. I stared wildly at the spot. Nothing. There was absolutely nothing there. Just the empty space between the sofa and the wall. No invisible man, no monster, no ghost. Just the wreckage of the vase. My eyes dropped to the floor, scanning for the evidence, for the thing that had driven me to this. I looked for the footprints. They were gone. The entire trail, from the bathroom, across the linoleum, onto the rug, had vanished. The floor was dry. There was no puddle in the bathroom. I could no longer hear the dripping sound from the vent. There was only the shattered vase and me, standing wild-eyed in the middle of my living room, clutching a handful of dead flower stems. Did I imagine it? Did I hallucinate the whole thing? The water, the footprints, the sound? Was this what a complete mental breakdown felt like? A sob of exhausted frustration tore from my throat. I looked around the room, a broken man in a broken home. That's when I saw it. My phone. It was on the coffee table, where I'd left it. The screen was dark. Then, it lit up. The screen came to life on its own, illuminating the dark corner of the room. It wasn't a call, it wasn't a text message. It displayed a photograph. A photo that had just been taken. It was a picture of my own back. I was wearing the same gray t-shirt I had on now. My shoulders were hunched. My head was slightly bowed. The collar of my shirt was dark with sweat. It was a perfectly clear, high-resolution image of me, taken from a low angle, from over my shoulder, from the exact spot on the floor, right behind the sofa, where I had just thrown the vase. The image burned, seared onto the back of my eyelids, my back. The photo was of my back. Hunched over, my shoulders tense, the collar of my gray t-shirt dark with sweat. It was a good picture. Too good. The focus was sharp. The lighting was perfect, catching the faint texture of the fabric. It was artful. It had been composed. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the coffee table. The screen went dark. My own breathing was a harsh, ragged sound in the quiet room. The roar of the storm outside felt a million miles away. My gaze darted from the dark phone screen to the empty space behind the sofa. The space where I had swung the vase. The spot from which the photo had been taken. My legs were water. My stomach was a knot of ice. It had been there. Right there. Inches away. Close enough to smell my fear, close enough to reach out and touch me. The thought was a physical blow. I stumbled back, my heel catching on a shard of the broken vase. Pain flared in my foot, sharp and grounding. I looked down. A dark line of red was welling up from a small cut. Blood. Real. This was real. No more panic. No more freezing. That's what it wanted. Action. I needed to take action. My mind, sputtering back to life, latched onto the only rational enemy it could comprehend. A hacker. A breach. This wasn't a ghost leaving wet footprints. This was a person. A person with a camera. A person who had gotten into my network. Into my devices. The texts, the TV, the laptop camera, the phone. It was all connected. It was a digital siege. And I was going to fight back. Adrenaline, cold and clean, surged through me. It pushed down the terror, replacing it with a hard, desperate fury. I lunged for my laptop, ignoring the stinging in my foot. I snatched it from the desk, ripping the power cord from the wall, and scrambled back to the relative safety of the sofa. I sat down amidst the debris of the vase, the dead petals crunching under my weight. My fingers flew across the keyboard, clumsy and slick with sweat. Login. Email. Settings. Security. Change password. My brain worked on pure instinct. I built a fortress. A long, meaningless string of characters. Capitals, lowercase, numbers, symbols. Something no one could ever guess. KZ $78. PQW_N. I typed it, confirmed it. A small, hollow victory. One down. Next, social media, the account I barely used. Click. Settings. Security. Change password. A new one, just as random. Hash GH3 ZT9 KLP. Done. Bank account. My heart hammered against my ribs as the page loaded. This was the real one. The one that mattered. My hands shook so badly I mistyped the first attempt. Fuck, I hissed, the word a dry rasp. I took a breath. Wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans. I typed slowly this time. Carefully. Another impenetrable wall of code. 9 at VMPWQZ 5AX. Confirmed. A notification flashed on the screen. Your password has been successfully updated. I felt a sliver of power return. A phantom sense of control. I was locking the doors. Boarding up the windows. Kicking it out of my digital life. I changed everything I could think of. Streaming services. Shopping sites. Old forums I hadn't visited in years. With each successful change, I felt the knot in my stomach loosen. Just a fraction. This was something I could control. This was a problem I could solve. I clicked save on the last one. I leaned back, my whole body trembling with the effort. I had done it. I had locked it out. I stared at my email inbox, a long list of confirmation messages. Your password has been changed. Your account security has been updated. Then, a new one appeared at the very top. Ping. It was from me. The sender was my own email address. My blood went cold. My eyes fixed on the subject line. 2 words. Weak password. I couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I clicked it open. The body of the email was a single sentence. I like the old one better. How? How could it know? It was instantaneous. Not even a minute had passed. It wasn't possible. It was watching me. It was watching me type. This wasn't a hack from across the world. This was intimate. My phone buzzed on the table. Then again, and again. A furious, insistent rhythm. I snatched it up. The screen was a waterfall of notifications. Ping! An email from Amazon. Your password has been successfully changed. Ping. Facebook. Your password was recently changed. Ping. My bank. Security alert. Your password has been reset. One by one, they flooded in. A reverse tide, undoing everything I had just done. It was toying with me. It was showing me how utterly, completely powerless I was. I was a child banging on a locked door, while the adult on the other side patiently re-engaged the bolt each time. The fury drained away, replaced by a hollow, sickening despair. I was losing. I had already lost. Then, The final email came. The subject line was just a single word. Hint. My stomach dropped. I opened it. It was another short, simple message. Mocking. Cruel. Try again. Hint. What was your mother's maiden name? The air left my lungs in a rush. That question. That specific, personal key to my entire online life. A piece of information I had never written down, never shared. A fact that was buried in memory in old documents, not floating around on some data breach list. This thing didn't just have my data. It had my life. It knew my history. It knew my mother. The room was silent. The only sound was the drumming of the rain and the frantic, useless spinning of my own thoughts. Who knew that? My sister? My dad? The circle was impossibly small. My mind raced, grabbing at names, at faces, trying to find a monster wearing a familiar mask. It was useless. There was no one. No one who would do this. A new sound entered the room. It was quiet at first, and for a second I thought I was imagining it. A low, electronic hum. It was the smart speaker on the kitchen counter, the one I got for free with a subscription, and mostly just used for weather forecasts. A small blue light was circling its rim. Then it spoke. The voice was distorted, a slow, digital drawl, like a recording played at half speed. It was slurred, each syllable dragged out with a kind of electronic glee. Kowalski. The sound filled the small apartment. It was the answer. My mother's maiden name, spoken aloud by a machine in my kitchen. My entire body went rigid. It wasn't just on the screen anymore. It was in the air, in the room with me. The voice didn't stop. Social, security, number. It began to read the digits, slowly, deliberately. 3, 5, 2. No. I choked out, a sound that was half a sob. 6, 8. Shut up, I whispered, scrambling to my feet. Shut the fuck up. 1, 9, 1, 4. It finished the number. The blue light kept circling. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, my world collapsing in on itself. That number was me, my identity, my entire existence in this country, reduced to 9 digits being recited by some twisted, bodiless entity. The voice started again. Elementary school! No! The wire snapped. Primal, unthinking rage erupted from a place deep inside me. I was a cornered animal. I launched myself toward the kitchen. I grabbed the speaker, my fingers digging into the plastic casing. I didn't unplug it. I ripped the cord from the wall, tearing a chunk of drywall with it. St. Jude's Academy, the speaker crackled, its voice cutting out for a second as the power wavered. I screamed, a raw, wordless sound of pure fury and terror. I raised the speaker over my head and slammed it down onto the tile floor. It shattered into a dozen pieces of black plastic and circuitry. But the onslaught wasn't over. The TV screen in the living room flickered on, bathing the room in a cold blue light. I spun around. It was my laptop. The screensaver had activated. It wasn't the usual floating geometric shapes. It was displaying my driver's license. A perfect, high-resolution scan. My own stupid, smirking face staring back at me. That was it. I couldn't take it. I ran through the apartment like a madman, yanking cords from sockets. The TV plug came out with a shower of sparks. The router. The lamp. I tore the power brick for the laptop out of the wall and threw it across the room. I needed darkness. I needed silence. I needed to cut the connection. Finally, it was over. I stood panting in the near-total darkness, the only light now a faint, sickly orange glow from the streetlights filtering through the rain-streaked window. The silence was absolute. No humming, no buzzing, no voice. Just the sound of my own heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. My foot throbbed. My hands ached. I was alone in the quiet. In the dark. My eyes slowly adjusted. I looked at the black rectangle of the laptop screen. It was dead. Powerless. Defeated. I took a shaky step towards it. Then another. I needed to see it. Needed to confirm it was off. I leaned in close, my face just inches from the dark glass. My own reflection was a ghostly, wild-eyed silhouette. I let out a shaky breath, the warm air fogging a small patch on the center of the screen. As the fog cleared, I saw it. It wasn't a reflection. It was on the surface of the screen itself. A thin layer of dust coated the monitor, a testament to my neglect. But the dust had been disturbed. A single finger had traced a word into the gray film. The lines were clear, deliberate. Remember, it hadn't just been in my devices. It had been in my room. It had been close enough to reach out its finger, close enough to write me a message on the screen of the very laptop I had been using to try and fight back. When? When had it done it? While I was desperately changing passwords? While I was smashing the speaker? Or was it standing in the darkness behind me right now, watching me read its handiwork? My back hit the wall. A low, strangled sound escaped my throat. The breath I had been holding rushed out, hot and sharp. My eyes darted from the laptop screen to the shadows pooling in the corners of the room. The darkness wasn't empty anymore. It was a presence. It had mass. It had been here, close enough to touch my things, close enough to leave its mark. My mind refused to process it. The word remember, traced in the dust on a dead screen. It was impossible. A trick of the light. A smudge I hadn't noticed before. But I knew. I knew the lines were fresh. The dust around them was undisturbed. A single, deliberate finger. Or was it watching me now? A faint smile playing on its lips from the darkest corner of the room, enjoying the show. That thought snapped me out of it. It was a physical jolt, like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. No, not here. Not anymore. This wasn't a digital siege. It was a home invasion. And I wasn't staying for the main event. Fight or flight. My body chose flight. Okay. I whispered to the silent room, the word a prayer. Okay. I'm leaving. The plan formed in a frantic, adrenaline-fueled burst. Get out. A hotel. Any hotel. Anonymous. Clean. Miles away from this place. Or my dad's house. Yes, my dad's. 2 hours north. Safe. Solid. He wouldn't understand, but he wouldn't have to. I just needed walls that weren't these walls. Action. I needed action. I scrambled toward my bedroom, my bare foot, the one I'd cut on the vase, leaving faint red smudges on the hardwood floor. I didn't care. I kicked the bedroom door open. It slammed against the stopper. I grabbed the backpack I used for the gym. It smelled like stale sweat. Perfect. I yanked open my dresser drawers. T-shirts. I grabbed a handful. Socks. Underwear. I shoved them into the bag, not folding, just stuffing. I went to the closet, pulled a pair of jeans off a hanger. Another hoodie. My hands were shaking, but they were working. This was good. This was control. Each item I packed was a step away from here. Each zip of the bag was a victory. Wallet. It was on the nightstand. I grabbed it, checked for my credit card. It was there. Phone. It was still on the coffee table, where I dropped it after the last wave of notifications. I snatched it up, ripped its charging cord from the wall socket, and coiled it furiously, shoving it deep into the backpack. The screen was dark. I left it that way. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want it to see me. I swung the backpack onto my shoulder. It felt heavy. It felt real. Hope, thin and watery, began to trickle back into my veins. I could do this. I could just walk out the door, get in my car, and drive until the sun came up. I would be a name on a check-in sheet at some roadside motel, and this whole nightmare would be a story I'd one day struggle to believe. I took a deep, steadying breath. One last thing. Car keys. I walked to the small hook by the front door, the place I always hung them the second I walked in. It was a stupid little habit, one my ex used to make fun of, but it meant I never lost them. The hook was empty. No, I muttered. A flicker of annoyance. Not now. Of all the times to misplace them. Come on! My eyes scanned the small entryway table beneath the hook. Nothing. Just a stack of junk mail and a dead plant. I patted the pockets of the jeans I was wearing. Empty. I ran back to the bedroom, my heart starting to patter a little faster. The jeans on the floor from yesterday? I kicked them over. No jingle. I plunged my hands into the pockets. Lint. A folded receipt. No keys. Fuck, I whispered. The annoyance was curdling, turning into something else. Okay, think. Where else? I'm an idiot. I leave them in weird places. The kitchen counter? I strode into the kitchen, my eyes sweeping over the surfaces. The shattered remains of the smart speaker crunched under my foot. I ignored it. I looked next to the sink, by the coffee maker, on top of the microwave. Nothing. The living room. I went back, my movements getting jerkier. I looked on the coffee table, on the TV stand. I ran my hands down the sides of the sofa cushions, my fingers digging deep into the cracks. I felt crumbs, a lost pen, loose change. No keys. This isn't happening. I started to tear the room apart. I pulled the cushions off the sofa and threw them on the floor. I tipped over the basket of magazines. I got on my hands and knees, peering into the dusty darkness under the furniture. The hope I'd felt just minutes before was gone, replaced by a rising tide of frantic energy. The walls felt closer. The silence in the apartment started to hum. My brain was screaming at me, "They have to be here. They're just keys. You just put them down somewhere. You're panicking. You're not thinking straight." But another, calmer voice in the back of my mind whispered a single, cold thought. It took them. It had been in the room. It had written on my laptop. Of course it took them. It knew I would try to run. The backpack suddenly felt impossibly heavy on my shoulder. It wasn't a survival kit anymore. It was a mockery. A bag full of useless things for a trip I was never going to take. I was trapped. I straightened up, standing in the middle of the mess I'd made. My breath was coming in short, harsh gasps. I was cornered. I was well and truly royally fucked. And then I heard it, a sound so small I almost missed it. Scrape. It came from the front door. A faint, metallic sound, like a mouse scratching at the wood. I froze, my entire body going rigid, every muscle locked. I didn't breathe. I just listened. Jingle, jingle, scrape. My blood turned to ice. It was a sound I knew better than my own name. The sound of my own keys. My head turned slowly, mechanically, toward the front door. My eyes fixed on the thin, dark rectangle of the mail slot set in the middle of the door. And then I saw them. The familiar silver gleam of my car key, followed by the brass of my apartment key. The greasy fob from my last oil change. They were being pushed through the mail slot from the other side. They dangled there for a beat, twisting slightly in the airless apartment, mocking me. Then, just as quickly, they were pulled back out. The slot was empty again. My mouth hung open. I couldn't make a sound. Jingle, scrape, they appeared again, pushed through just far enough for me to see them clearly. A glint of light caught the jagged edge of the car key. They swayed gently. 1, 2. Then they were gone. It was playing with me. It was standing right there, on the other side of a single slab of wood. It was in the hallway. It had my keys. It had my escape. And it was dangling them in front of me like a toy for a cat. All my frantic searching, my desperate hope, my plan. It had just been watching, waiting for me to exhaust myself before it began its game. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just trying to scare me. It was trying to break me. The rage came out of nowhere. It wasn't the blind panic of before. This was different. This was hot. It was a feral, cornered animal fury that burned away all the fear. It was standing right there. A person. A physical thing I could hit. I could fight. "You fucker!" The scream ripped out of my raw throat. I didn't think. I just moved. I dropped the backpack and launched myself across the room. I wasn't going for the peephole. I was going for the door. For the keys. I would rip the fucking door off its hinges if I had to. My hand slammed against the cold brass doorknob. The moment my skin made contact, the jingling stopped. Absolute silence from the other side. I froze, my palms sweating against the knob. My chest heaved. I held my breath, listening. Nothing, not a footstep, not the sound of the elevator, not a whisper. He had been right there. A second ago. Slowly, carefully, I let go of the knob. My rage evaporated as quickly as it had come, leaving a hollow, trembling void. I leaned forward, pressing my face against the cool wood of the door. My eye found the small, dark circle of the peephole. I looked through. The hallway stretched out before me, distorted and curved by the fisheye lens. The beige, scuffed walls, the faded, ugly carpet, the flickering fluorescent light overhead that buzzed and cast everything in a sterile, green-tinged glow. It was empty. Completely, utterly empty. There was nowhere to hide. The doors to the other apartments were closed. The stairwell door was a solid 50 feet away at the end of the hall. The elevator was even further. There was no way anyone could have vanished that quickly. It was impossible. I stayed there for a long time, my eye glued to the peephole, scanning the silent, empty space, waiting for a shadow to move, waiting for a door to creak open. But there was nothing, just the endless, humming silence of a building asleep. Had I imagined it? The thought was a traitor, slithering into my mind. Was I losing it? Was the stress, the fear, finally making me see and hear things that weren't there? The word on the laptop, the keys at the door. Defeated, I pushed myself away from the door. My shoulders slumped. My legs felt like they were filled with sand. I turned around to face my apartment, to face the wreckage of my failed escape. And I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. There, on the dining room table, the first place I had sworn I looked, was a small, metallic pile. My car keys. They were lying neatly, perfectly, right in the center of the dark wood surface, as if they had been there all along. But they hadn't been. I knew they hadn't. I had run my hand over that exact spot. I had stared at it. I would have seen them. My feet felt glued to the floor. I couldn't move. I could only stare. The keys sat there, silent and solid. A statement. I was never in the hallway. I was in here with you the whole time. And that wasn't the only thing on the table. Lying next to the keys was something else. A large, leather-bound book. My childhood photo album. I didn't keep it out. It lived on the top shelf of my closet, buried under old yearbooks and boxes I hadn't opened in a decade. It was open. Propped up like a display in a museum. It was open to a specific page. My legs finally obeyed me. I took a step, then another, moving as if through water. My eyes were locked on the photograph that filled the right-hand page. It was a faded, glossy picture from a birthday party. Me, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with a stupid paper hat askew on my head and a smear of chocolate cake on my cheek. Beside me, her arm wrapped around my small shoulders, was my mother. She was younger than I am now, smiling a genuine, unburdened smile right at the camera, right at me. Her maiden name was Kowalski. My world tilted on its axis. The air thickened, and all sound faded away, leaving only the frantic, useless pounding of my own heart. It knew. It didn't just know a name from a security question. It knew a face from a memory. It had gone through my things. It had touched my past. It had sat at my table and leafed through the pages of my life, choosing this one, specific image to leave out for me. A hint. A threat. A promise. The game wasn't over. It was just getting started. I didn't run. I flew. The photo album on the table wasn't just a book. It was a tombstone. A declaration. The world shrank to a single, primal command that echoed in the deepest part of my brain. Hide. My legs pumped, carrying me out of the living room, away from that picture, away from my mother's smile. I hit the hallway and didn't slow down. Bedroom. Now. I threw myself at the door, crashing into it with my shoulder. It flew open and slammed against the wall. The sound was a cannon blast in the dead air. I didn't care. I spun around, my eyes wild, searching for something. Anything. My gaze landed on the heavy oak dresser against the far wall. Yes, that. My hands found the smooth, cool wood. My fingers dug for a grip. I grunted, my sneakered feet slipping on the hardwood floor as I heaved. It was heavy. Heavier than I remembered. A deep groaning sound scraped through the room as the dresser's legs fought against the floor. Inches turned into a foot. Sweat beaded on my forehead. I put my back into it, shoving with everything I had. The edge of the dresser slammed against the door, wedging it shut. Good. Solid. I stumbled back, my chest heaving, sucking in huge gulps of air. My eyes darted around my new prison. It was a fortress. It had to be. Closet. I ripped the closet door open, my hands fumbling through old jackets and shirts until they found it. The cold, smooth weight of my old Louisville Slugger. I gripped the worn leather handle. It felt good. It felt real. A solid piece of ashwood against whatever this was. I slid down the wall opposite the door, the bat resting heavy across my knees. My breathing was a ragged engine in the quiet. I held perfectly still, listening. The house was silent. Too silent. The normal groans and clicks of a building settling were gone. It was like the whole apartment was holding its breath with me. The phone. I needed to call the police. I had to call them. My hand, slick with sweat, fumbled in my back pocket. I pulled out the phone. The dark screen. A mirror reflecting my own terrified face. My thumb jabbed at the power button. The screen flared to life. Full bars. LTE service. Perfect. My thumb flew across the screen, jabbing 911 and hitting the call button before my brain could even register the numbers. I pressed the phone to my ear, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing. No ringtone, no connection tone, just dead air. The call timer on the screen stayed at 0. I pulled it away from my ear and stared at it. Call failed. What the fuck? I whispered. Fear gave way to a surge of angry frustration. I tried again. 911. Call. Call failed. I tried a third time, my thumb mashing the screen so hard I thought it would crack. Call failed. Full fucking bars. How? How was this possible? Was the network jammed? In the middle of the night? It made no sense. It was another game. Another way to cut me off, to isolate me in this box. I was holding a useless piece of glass and metal. I was about to throw it against the wall when it lit up. The screen glowed. The phone began to vibrate violently in my hand, the buzzing sound monstrously loud in the silence. It was ringing. My blood went cold. My throat closed up. On the screen, in stark white letters, were 2 words. Hidden number. It wasn't a call for help. It was a call from hell. My thumb hovered over the green accept icon. Don't answer. Don't answer it. It's what it wants. But what if I didn't? What would happen then? Would it just get angry? My own logic was a snake eating its own tail. I had to know. I had to hear it. I took a shaky breath and slid my thumb across the screen. I brought the phone to my ear slowly, like it might bite me. Hello. My own voice was a dry croak. Silence. Not just quiet. A deep, hollow silence. The kind of silence that has weight to it. I could hear the faint electronic hum of the open line. A sound so low it was more of a feeling in my skull. I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. Who is this? I demanded, trying to inject strength into my voice and failing completely. What do you want? Still nothing. Just that empty, listening silence. It was on the other end of this line. Somewhere. Waiting. Listening to me breathe. I pictured it standing on a street corner, or in a car, looking up at my window. And I heard it. Through the phone? No, not through the phone. It came from outside my bedroom door. Click! It was a small sound. A tiny, insignificant sound that I had heard 1,000 times before. But I knew it. My body knew it before my brain did. A jolt of pure ice flooded my veins. It was the sound of the light switch in my living room. The one with the loose plate that makes that exact noise when you flip it on. The call wasn't coming from outside. My mind shattered. The phone was still pressed against my ear. The silence on the other end was no longer empty. It was present. It was close. The person I was talking to, the thing I was talking to, was in my apartment. Right now. Standing in my living room. Under the light that had just been turned on. It had used the call to hold me in place. To make me listen. To make sure I heard it. My entire body went rigid. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The bat felt like a toothpick. The dresser against the door felt like cardboard. And then the silence on the phone broke. A voice whispered out of the speaker, a voice that was almost familiar but twisted, warped through some digital filter, like a recording played at the wrong speed. It was low and full of gravel. Fun game, it rasped, the words stretching out. I like the part with the keys. A whimper escaped my throat. I couldn't help it. But you're not a very good host. the voice continued, a sick, mocking cheerfulness in its tone. "Hiding in your room, that's no fun at all." My eyes were locked on the door, on the thin line of shadow underneath it. "So how about we play a new game?" the voice crackled. "My favorite, hide and seek." The line went dead. The call was over. But the game had just begun. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. My breath hitched. I squeezed the baseball bat, my knuckles turning white. I was a cornered rat. This was it. Thump. A heavy footstep. Slow. Deliberate. The sound of a heavy boot on the hardwood floor. My heart seized. It was coming. Thump. Closer now. Just outside the living room. I pressed myself further against the wall, trying to make myself smaller, trying to will myself invisible. My eyes burned from not blinking. I didn't dare breathe. The sound would give me away. Thump! It was in the hallway. The short hallway that led to my bedroom. To me, I could feel the vibrations through the floor. It was heavy. It was real. Thump! It was right outside the door. And then, silence. The footsteps stopped. My entire universe was now the 3 feet of space between me and that door. It was out there, standing, listening. Could it hear my heart? It felt like a drum solo against my ribs. I was sure it could. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The silence was worse than the footsteps. The waiting was a form of torture all its own. What was it doing? Why was it just standing there? My eyes were glued to the brass doorknob, and it began to turn. Slowly, so slowly. I watched in absolute horror as the knob rotated, the metal groaning softly. It turned until it couldn't turn anymore, and then the door pushed forward. It hit the dresser with a dull, solid thud. The knob rattled. The door pushed again, harder this time. Thump, thump. The dresser shifted a fraction of an inch. "Fuck!" I mouthed, the word soundless. It tried again, a violent shove that shook the heavy piece of furniture. But it held. My fortress was holding. Then the rattling stopped. The doorknob turned back to its original position. More silence. Had it given up? Was it going to try and break it down? My mind raced through a dozen horrible possibilities. Then I saw it. A sliver of white appeared in the crack of darkness under the door. It pushed through, scraping quietly against the wooden floor. A small, folded piece of paper. It stopped in the middle of the gap, a white flag of surrender in a war. One didn't understand. My body moved on its own. I crawled forward, my legs trembling. The bat was a useless weight in my hand. I reached out, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely pinch the edge of the paper. I pulled it toward me. It was a page torn from a notebook. I unfolded it. There were 5 words on the paper, scrawled in a thick, black marker. The letters were jagged, angry. "I know you're behind the dresser." My fingers were a vice around the crumpled piece of paper. The words were burned into my retinas. "I know you're behind the dresser." For how long I crouched there, I don't know. Time dissolved into a thick paste of fear. My whole world was the space under my bedroom door, and the heavy oak furniture that was the only thing keeping death out. Every creak of the building was a footstep. Every rush of wind against the glass was a hand testing the latch. But nothing happened. The silence that followed the note was a different kind. It wasn't the loaded, listening silence from before. This was empty. Final. Did it leave? Was that the end of the game? A final, psychological jab before simply walking away. I stayed there, cramped and cold on the floor, until the first weak gray light of dawn began to seep through the blinds. The light didn't feel warm. It didn't feel safe. It just made the shadows in my room look darker, deeper. Slowly, my body unknotted itself. My joints screamed. I got to my feet, the baseball bat still clutched in one hand, the note in the other. I listened. Nothing. Just the distant hum of the city starting to wake up. He was gone. It was gone. The thought didn't bring relief. It brought a new, cold kind of dread. Because it could come back. And next time, they would call me crazy. They would say I imagined it, a bad dream, a prank. No, not this time. My eyes fell on my phone, lying face down on the floor where I dropped it. Evidence. I needed evidence. A surge of frantic energy shot through me, overriding the exhaustion. I had to prove it. I had to show them. They have to see this, I whispered, my voice raw. They have to believe me. I snatched the phone. My thumb slid across the screen, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it again. I found the camera icon and stabbed it. The red record button appeared. I pressed it. The timer started ticking. 01002. Okay. I breathed, turning the phone on myself first, my face a pale, haunted mask in the viewfinder. My name is... Shit! I didn't need to say my name. I just needed to show them. I pivoted, aiming the lens at the bedroom door. It was right outside. It pushed. It pushed the dresser. I moved the camera to show the heavy piece of furniture wedged against the door. See? I had to block it. My movements were jerky, desperate. I needed to capture everything before the world tried to erase it. I stumbled out of the bedroom, my heart still a jackhammer against my ribs. Every shadow in the hallway was a man with a knife. But the apartment was empty. The front door was still locked, the chain still on. How did it get in? How did it get out? The questions made my head spin. No time, just record. I went into the bathroom. The air was cold. It left something on the mirror. I'd scrubbed it off days ago, the weird, greasy lipstick message. A joke from a friend, I thought. But no, he mentioned the keys. He knew. It was all connected. Then I saw it. Knew. A single, perfect kiss mark in bright red lipstick, right at eye level on the medicine cabinet mirror. My stomach lurched. It had been back. Or it had never left. I shoved the phone toward it, making sure the camera captured the waxy, obscene shape. See? Right there. That's not mine. I live alone. Back in the living room. The tape? I mumbled, panning the camera across the floor. The box. It left a box sealed with duct tape. I showed the camera the empty spot on the coffee table where the photo album had been. I'd flung it into the trash. Now I wished I hadn't. But the tape was still there. I zoomed in on the piece of silver duct tape I had peeled off, now stuck to the edge of the table. This tape. It was on the box. Then the note. I still had it clutched in my fist. I smoothed it out on the floor, the black marker scrawling across the page. I held the phone steady, the lens focused on the 5 horrible words. And this. It slid this under my door. It knew where I was. I felt a sliver of control returning. This was proof. This was real. This was undeniable. One last thing. The handprint. The dirty, greasy handprint on the living room window I'd seen a few days ago. The one that had made the hairs on my arm stand up. That was the start of it all. I had to get that. I walked to the window, the morning light making the glass pane a sheet of gray. I raised the phone, ready to capture the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't there. I stopped. My arm froze in midair. I lowered the phone. What? I breathed. The glass was clean. Perfectly clean. Not a smudge. Not a streak. It was clearer than I'd ever seen it. I stepped closer, my nose almost touching the pane. Nothing. My mind raced. Did I imagine it? No, it was there. I saw it. A right hand, finger splayed, palm pressed against the glass. It was smudged, like from a greasy engine. I remember thinking it was creepy as hell. I remember making a note to clean it, but it was gone. No, wait, I said to the empty room, my own voice sounding thin and strange. I swear I saw it. A cold seed of doubt planted itself in my gut. Was I that tired? Was I losing it? Maybe the stress of the last 24 hours was making me see things that weren't there. Maybe I was going crazy. The intruder was real. The note was real. But the handprint? What if the handprint was just me? A paranoid delusion? Okay, the thought was terrifying. If I couldn't trust my own eyes, what could I trust? Ha! I shook my head, hard. No. Don't let it do this to you. It's trying to make you doubt yourself. I had the rest. The lipstick. The tape. The note. That was enough. It had to be enough. I needed to see it. All of it. I needed to watch the video back and reassure myself that I wasn't insane. I walked back to the couch and sank into it, my legs suddenly weak. The bat clattered to the floor. I stabbed the stop button on the camera app. The video saved. My thumb fumbled for the gallery icon. The folder opened. There it was, the newest video. 3 minutes and 42 seconds long. I tapped play. The video started. My pale, terrified face filled the screen. I could hear my own ragged breathing. Good. It's working. My name is... Shit. My voice, tinny and scared, came from the phone speaker. The camera panned to the door, the dresser. See? I had to block it. Yes. It's all there. The video followed my path out of the bedroom, the hallway jumping and shaking with every step. I watched myself enter the bathroom. The phone's camera swung towards the medicine cabinet. It left something on the mirror, my recorded voice said, and I watched the camera pan across a perfectly clean, empty mirror. My blood turned to ice. What the fuck? I whispered. I grabbed the video's timeline scrubber, my thumb skidding across the screen, dragging it back, then forward. The camera in the video moved toward the mirror. The mirror was empty. My recorded voice talked about something that wasn't there. No. My heart started to beat again, a frantic, wild tempo. My vision narrowed. I jumped the timeline forward, to the living room. The tape, my voice said. The camera on the phone zoomed in on the edge of the coffee table. An empty coffee table. There was no piece of duct tape stuck to the edge. I couldn't breathe. My throat closed up. This wasn't possible. This wasn't fucking possible. I watched it. I filmed it. It was there. The last part. The note. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. I scrubbed to the end of the video. My recorded self was kneeling. And this. It slid this under my door. The camera in the video pointed down at the floor. At the clean, empty hardwood floor. The note was gone. Every single piece of evidence. Wiped. Not just from my apartment, but from the digital record I had just made. It was like editing reality. It was like reaching into my phone and plucking the facts out of existence, leaving behind only the babbling of a madman. It was in my phone. It was watching me through my own camera as I recorded. It was undoing my proof as I created it. The phone felt like a hot coal in my hand. I wanted to smash it, to throw it against the wall, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. I was holding a black mirror that was being controlled by something else. Then the screen flickered. The video player closed. The phone gallery opened on its own. My thumb was a useless bystander. I watched as the screen swiped left, a spectral finger scrolling through my photos. It stopped. A new video file was at the top of my camera roll. A video I didn't take. The timestamp was from 5 minutes ago. The preview thumbnail was just a dark, grainy image of my living room from a strange angle. Low down, near the floor, like it was sitting on the bookshelf. My finger moved without my permission. My body needed to know. I pressed play. The video began. The quality was poor, grainy, like a cheap security camera. The angle was from the corner of the living room, looking out. It was a still shot. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, a figure walked into the frame from the direction of the bedroom. It was me. I watched myself walk into my own bathroom. My face was slack, my eyes were open but unfocused. I moved like a person in a trance, like a sleepwalker. I watched my own hand reach out. I saw myself pick up a tissue from the counter. I saw myself methodically, carefully, wipe the lipstick kiss from the mirror until not a trace was left. My own hand, my own face. The figure, the me on the screen, walked back into the living room. It knelt down. It took the piece of silver duct tape from the edge of the table, folded it over and over into a tiny square, and put it in its pocket. Then it walked to where the note lay on the floor. My heart stopped. I watched my own hands pick up the paper, the note that was proof, the note that held the 5 words of terror. The person on the screen didn't even read it. It just calmly, deliberately tore the paper into tiny, tiny pieces. Then it gathered the confetti of paper in its palm and walked off screen, into the kitchen. I heard the trash can lid open and close. The horror was so absolute, so complete, that I couldn't even make a sound. A whimper died in my throat. I was watching my own body, my own hands, meticulously destroy the evidence of my own terror. I was the one cleaning up the crime scene. The figure walked back into frame. It moved to the living room window. It pulled its sleeve down over its hand and began to polish the glass, my own arm moving in slow, circular motions, wiping away a handprint that only I had seen, wiping away the last shred of my own sanity. The video ended. The screen went black. For a long moment, I just stared at the dead reflection of my phone. A dark, silent rectangle. My own face stared back at me from the void. Pale. Eyes wide, with a terror that had no name. Cheeks hollowed out by a night that would never end. And then I saw it. In the reflection. My face in the black glass. It smiled. A slow, sick curve of the lips. A knowing, triumphant smirk that did not belong to me. It lasted for only a heart-stopping second. A glitch in the reflection. Then it was gone, leaving only my own horrified face staring back. The phone hit the floor. The screen went dark. I didn't move. My own face, twisted in a smile that wasn't mine, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. A ghost in the machine. A demon in the glass. I sat there on the couch, my limbs turned to lead. The phone was a dead thing on the rug. A black rectangle full of lies. Full of a truth I couldn't accept. It was me. The video showed me. My hands, my face, my body, moving with a calm purpose I didn't possess, erasing the monster's tracks. The monster was me. My throat was a desert. My head felt hollowed out, scraped clean of thought. There was only the image, that smile. A slow, knowing, triumphant smirk. It belonged to the thing that pushed the note under my door. The thing that left the kiss mark. The thing that piloted my body like a stolen car. I don't know how long I sat. The gray morning light I'd been watching through the blinds was gone. I blinked, and my apartment was sunk in shadow. I blinked again, and the orange glow of a street lamp painted a stripe across the wall. My eyes found the clock on the microwave. The green numbers stared back. 8:14 p.m. No, that's not right. A tremor started in my hands. It was morning. I just sat down. I just watched the video. That was minutes ago, not hours. Not a whole day. Swallowed by what? By nothing. A blank space. A chunk of my life carved out and thrown away. I had been sitting on the floor. I remembered the hardwood digging into my spine. Now I was on the couch. I didn't remember moving. The fear returned, different this time, not sharp and sudden, but a dull, spreading cold. It was the fear of losing myself. A noise. A low, pathetic growl. It was my own stomach. A blast of hunger so intense it was painful. It was a crude animal need that cut through the fog. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't even thought about food since yesterday? My God. I pushed myself up. My joints screamed in protest. Every muscle felt like it had been run through a meat grinder. The walk to the kitchen was a slow, shuffling march. I braced myself against the doorframe, needing water, needing something to prove the world was still solid, and then I saw it. On the small kitchen table, where I never eat, was a plate. A plate of macaroni and cheese. The good kind, baked in the oven, with a crust of golden brown breadcrumbs on top. Steam was still coiling off it in the dim light. My favorite. The meal my mom made for me when I was sick, when I was scared. Beside the plate was a tall glass of ice water, sweating cold onto the wood. What the hell? The whisper came out as a dry crackle. I backed away. One step. Then another. My heel hit the fridge. My eyes darted around the kitchen. The shadows were deep. Anything could be standing in them. Someone was in my apartment. Just now. Long enough to cook a meal. To bake something in my oven. To know what I loved. The thought didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like a violation. Like it had reached inside my memories and pulled one out. Ding dong. The sound of the doorbell was a gunshot in the silent apartment. I flinched so hard my head hit the refrigerator. My heart, which had been a dull thud, became a machine gun against my ribs. It knew I was awake. It knew I'd seen the food. Now it was at the door. Don't move. Don't breathe. I slid along the wall, my back scraping against the drywall. My body was screaming at me to run, to hide, but where? It was already inside. It had been in my kitchen. It was in my head. I needed to see. I had to see. I crept to the front door. My hand shook as I reached for the peephole. I put my eye to the cold metal. The fisheye lens showed me the hallway. Brightly lit. Empty, except for a kid. A teenager in a red polo shirt with the City Bites delivery logo on it. He was looking at his phone. He looked harmless. He looked normal. He knocked again. A sharp rap, rap, rap that made me jump. Hello? Food delivery for Nathan? He said my name. My breath hitched in my throat. I stayed silent, pressed against the door, my eye glued to the hole. Hey, man, got your order here, he called out, his voice muffled by the wood. It's all paid for, credit card. I just gotta leave it. Paid for. I didn't order any food. My mind spun, trying to connect the dots. The food on the table. The delivery at the door. It wasn't one or the other. It was both. 2 separate meals. One made in my kitchen, one brought to my door. It was a siege. A calculated act of what? Care. It was trying to take care of me. To feed me. The idea was so twisted it made me want to vomit. I watched through the peephole as the kid shrugged, placed a brown paper bag on my doormat, and turned. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hall. I waited until I heard the distant clang of the elevator doors opening and closing. He was gone. Silence. The bag was outside. The plate was inside. Trapped. I was trapped between 2 acts of an impossible kindness. My eyes went back to the kitchen, to the meal waiting for me. I had to know. The hunger was gone, replaced by a morbid need for answers. I forced my legs to move, walking back to the table like a man on death row. The macaroni and cheese still steamed. It looked perfect. It looked delicious. It looked like a trap. Then I saw it. A detail I'd missed. A tiny flag sticking out of the pasta. A small, square piece of paper, folded in half and shoved into the breadcrumbs. A note. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages. I plucked the paper from the food. It was a yellow, sticky note, warm to the touch. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. 5 words, written in neat, black ink. Eat up. It's a long night. The words themselves were a punch to the gut, a promise of more horror to come. But that wasn't what made the air leave my lungs. It wasn't what made my vision swim. It was the handwriting. I knew that handwriting. A sick feeling of recognition washed over me. A gut-level certainty that was worse than any monster crashing through a window. It looked familiar. Too familiar. No, I breathed. No, no, no. I scrambled to the small counter by the door, where I dumped my mail. I pawed through the envelopes and junk flyers. I found it. A gas bill. In the memo section of the stub, I'd scribbled a reminder to myself. Pay before Friday. I carried the bill back to the kitchen table. I laid the utility bill down next to the yellow sticky note. My hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled against the wood. Eat up. It's a long night. Pay before Friday. I looked at the loop on the G in long. It was the same lazy open loop as the F in Friday. I saw the way the T in eat was crossed, a sharp, decisive slash. Identical to the T in before. The Y in pay swooped down, and to the left, a hook that was an exact mirror of the Y in my. My signature, my personal tell. It was my handwriting. The world tilted. The floor fell away from me. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a forgery. This was me. I wrote this note. I wrote this note, and I did not remember. The other one. The one from the video. The one who cleaned. He also cooked. He also left messages. A new kind of panic took hold. It was not the fear of an external threat. It was the terror of self-betrayal. My own mind was a hostile country. My own body was an enemy agent. I was the haunted house. I needed a weapon. But what for? Who was I going to fight? The smiling man in the reflection? He's 3. My survival instinct screamed, overriding the confusion. It didn't matter who it was. I needed to be able to fight. My eyes locked onto the wooden knife block on the counter. Solid. Real. A block of wood with blades in it. I lunged for it, my hand closing around the biggest handle. The chef's knife. I pulled it free with a slick shing of steel. The weight of it in my palm was a small comfort. It was cold. It was heavy. It was real. I held it up in the dim kitchen light, ready to face the reflection, ready to face myself. That's when I saw my hand, the hand gripping the knife. There was something under my fingernails, a fine, white dust. I brought my hand closer to my face, squinting. It looked like flour. On my thumb and index finger, there was a faint, greasy shine, like butter or oil. My heart stopped. I slowly, deliberately, lowered the knife and looked at my other hand. The same. Traces of white powder caught in the cuticles. An oily film that I could feel when I rubbed my fingers together. It was the residue of cooking, the flour for a sauce, the butter for the breadcrumbs. My gaze traveled from my own dirty fingers to the steaming plate of macaroni and cheese. I looked at the golden brown crust, perfectly toasted. I looked at the glass of ice water, condensation beading on its side. Then I looked back at my hands. The hands that had just cooked a meal I had no memory of making. The knife clattered from my grasp, hitting the linoleum floor with a deafening crack. I didn't even flinch. I just stared at my own hands. My enemy's hands. The horror was complete. The monster wasn't coming. It was already here. The linoleum was cold against my back. My fingers were numb. I stared at them, at the faint white residue, the greasy sheen. My hands. The ones that had just held a knife. The ones that had just cooked a meal. The ones that belonged to a stranger who lived inside my skin. I pushed myself up. My body protested, a symphony of aching joints and strained muscles. I didn't care. The shock was gone. The terror was still there, a low hum beneath my ribs, but something else was solidifying in its place. A cold, hard thing. Rage. No more. No more running. No more hiding in my own head while this thing drove my body around like a joyrider. If it was in here, I was going to drag it out into the light. If it wanted to play games, fine, we'd play. My eyes scanned the apartment. It was a wreck, a testament to my slow-motion breakdown. But in the corner of the living room, gathering dust on a bookshelf, was a box. I moved toward it, my steps deliberate now. I bought it years ago, a cheap nanny cam, back when I was paranoid about a landlord snooping. I never even used it. Until now. I pulled it out. A little black cube, smaller than my palm, with a tiny, unblinking lens. A single eye. My eye. I found the power cord and plugged it into the wall outlet behind the TV stand. I angled it, tweaked it, hid it behind a stack of old paperbacks. It had a perfect, wide-angle view of the front door, the hallway, and most of the living room. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I downloaded the generic app, my fingers fumbling with the password for the Wi-Fi. A moment later, a grainy, low-res image of my own living room stared back at me from the screen. It was ugly. It was distorted. But it was real. It was proof. "I'll catch you, you bastard," I whispered to the empty room. The words felt good. They felt solid. For the first time in days, I wasn't just a victim. I was a hunter. I took the phone and retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind me but leaving it unlocked. A cage needs an open door to work. I sat on the edge of my unmade bed, my back against the wall. The phone was my lifeline, my one connection to an objective truth. I watched the live feed, The empty couch. The front door, still and silent. The plate of macaroni, now cold on the kitchen table in the background. Nothing. The minutes stretched. 5, 10, 20. The only sound was my own breathing, loud in the small room. My eyes started to burn from staring at the tiny screen. Maybe it knew. Maybe it was waiting. My thumb hovered over the screen, ready to rewind, to check for any glitch, any shadow I might have missed. That's when I heard it. It wasn't on the phone. It was in the apartment. A low, wooden groan. A familiar sound. The sound of the hall closet door, the one with the bad hinge. It was opening. My head snapped up. My eyes shot from the phone to my bedroom door, as if I could see through it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked back at the phone screen. The live feed was unchanged. The living room was perfectly still. The front door hadn't opened. No one had walked past the camera. It was already inside. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It hadn't come in through the door. It wasn't a ghost passing through walls. It had been in the closet the whole time, hiding, waiting for me to think I was alone, waiting for me to set my stupid little trap. It was always one step ahead. It had been 10 feet away from me when I set up the camera. It had been listening. My blood ran cold. The hunter was the bait. I kept my eyes glued to the phone, my only window to the outside world. The closet wasn't in the camera's view, a perfect blind spot. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. A presence in the apartment that was thick and heavy. I was holding my breath, waiting for a shape to step out into the hallway, to walk in front of my camera and finally show its face. But nothing happened. Just silence. A crushing, absolute silence. Then the phone screen flickered. A line of static shot across the image. Then another. The picture of my living room warped, stretching and compressing like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. The colors bled into each other. The feed stuttered, freezing for a second on a distorted image of my couch. Then it tore itself apart in a cascade of green and purple pixels. The screen went black. A second later, white text appeared, stark, clean, impersonal. Connection to camera lost. I stared at the words. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a dead battery. It was a severed wire. A deliberate act. It knew. It knew I was watching. It saw my eye on the bookshelf, and it had just plucked it out. I was blind now. Utterly, completely blind, sitting in a dark room, waiting. The apartment fell silent again. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full. It was the silence of a predator that has cornered its prey and is taking its time. My own home was now enemy territory, and I had just lost my only map. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, every hum from the refrigerator was a potential threat. My senses were on fire. My ears strained, trying to catch the sound of a footstep, a breath, anything. Where was it? Was it still in the living room? Was it in the kitchen? Was it standing right outside my door? The questions hammered at my skull. My hand tightened on the phone, the useless plastic and glass a mockery of the control I thought I had. Then came the sound I had been dreading. The soft, metallic turn of my bedroom doorknob. It moved slowly, without a sound, a quarter turn to the right. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was a statue on the edge of the bed, my eyes locked on the door. I had left it unlocked. A mistake. A fatal, stupid mistake. The latch clicked. A sound as loud as a gunshot in the dead air. Slowly, inch by inch, the door began to swing inward, pushed by an unseen hand. A vertical line of brighter light from the hallway cut through the gloom of my bedroom, widening with agonizing slowness. I scrambled backward on the bed, my back hitting the cold drywall with a thud. My mouth was open, a scream trapped in my throat, but no sound came out. The door swung fully open, and a figure stood in the doorway. It was a silhouette, perfectly framed by the light from the hall. I couldn't see a face, no eyes, no expression. Just a shape. A man's shape. The same height as me. The same build. The same shoulders. It was a copy of me, cut from black paper. My mind screeched. I was ready for a monster, for a killer with a mask, for something I could fight, something I could understand. But this was worse. It was the smiling man from the video, made solid. It just stood there, in the doorway, perfectly still. The silence stretched, tight and thin. It felt like an eternity. We were locked in a standoff, the real me and the shadow me. Then it moved. Slowly, the silhouette raised its right arm. It held its hand up, palm forward, and it waved. It was a small, simple gesture, a casual, friendly wave, a hello, the kind of wave you give a neighbor you pass in the hall. The sheer, calm normality of it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. My mind shattered. The wave was not a threat. It was a greeting. It was an acknowledgement. It was an introduction. I stared, frozen, as the arm lowered back to its side. The silhouette stood there for one more second, a dark monument in my doorway. Then, it stepped back. The door began to swing shut, just as slowly as it had opened. The slice of light narrowed, the silhouette disappearing behind the moving wood. The darkness was returning, swallowing my room whole. The door closed with a soft thump, plunging me into near-total blackness. Silence. Then, click. The sound was small, but it echoed in the room like a thunderclap. The distinct, final sound of a lock turning. From the outside. My sanctuary had become my cell, and the warden was wearing my face. The door thumped shut. The darkness was absolute. My room, once a sanctuary, was gone, replaced by a black void. Then the click. That small, metallic sound. A final, definitive sound. The sound of the lock turning. From the outside. My breath hitched. I didn't move. I couldn't. Frozen. My back pressed against the wall at the head of my bed. My mind was a blank slate of white noise. The silhouette. The wave. The door closing. The lock. A sequence of events that didn't compute. It was impossible. A nightmare playing out behind my eyes. But the wall behind me was real. The lumpy mattress beneath me was real. The click was real. I lunged off the bed, my feet hit the floorboards with a thud, and I scrambled for the door, my hands slapping against the cool, smooth wood. I found the knob. I twisted. Nothing. It turned freely, a loose, useless piece of metal. Locked. It was locked. "No," I whispered. My own voice sounded foreign. I rattled the knob, a frantic, desperate sound that echoed in the tiny space. I pushed my shoulder against the door. Once. Twice. It didn't budge. Solid oak. It felt like a bank vault door. I beat my fists against it, the dull thuds, a pathetic protest. "Hey!" My voice cracked. "Hey, let me out!" Silence. Only the sound of my own ragged breathing answered me. I stopped, pressing my ear against the wood. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. I listened. I strained, willing my ears to pick up anything. A footstep. A cough. The rustle of clothing. Nothing. Not a single goddamn thing. The silence from the other side was a physical presence. It was heavier than any sound. It was the silence of something that knew I was listening. It was the silence of something that was enjoying this. The warden was on the other side of my door, and he was listening to me break. I backed away from the door, my hands held up in front of me as if to ward something off. I paced the small space, a caged animal. My room. I knew every inch of it, but in the dark, it was enemy territory. I bumped into my desk, sending a stack of papers cascading to the floor. The soft flutter was like a gunshot. I froze, listening again. Still nothing. I tripped over a pile of dirty laundry. I was a stranger in my own home. My back found the wall again. I slid down it, my legs giving out, until I was sitting on the floor. My knees were drawn up to my chest. I was a child hiding from monsters. The rage I had felt earlier, that cold, hard thing, was gone. It had been replaced by a raw, primal fear. I was trapped, utterly and completely. Time ceased to exist. Minutes could have been hours. The only thing that mattered was the silence, the waiting, the not knowing. Then something changed. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a sight. It was a thought. A single word that bloomed in the center of my mind, cool and sharp. Pathetic. I flinched. The thought wasn't mine. It didn't feel like my own internal voice. It was other. An intrusion. My mind is snapping, I thought, trying to force the logic back in. The stress. I'm cracking up. That's all it is. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing the heels of my palms against my temples. Go away. Just a symptom. Just a glitch in the wiring. You're so weak. The voice was clearer this time. A calm, conversational whisper, right between my ears. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a growl. It was a statement of fact. Get out. I hissed into the darkness. Get out of my head. I was talking to myself. I was officially losing it. A laugh, sharp and hysterical, tried to bubble up from my chest, but it died in my throat. This wasn't funny. This was the end of the line. A soft, amused chuckle echoed in my skull. It was a sound I had never heard before, yet it felt horribly familiar. Oh, I'm not in your head. Not really. I am you. The statement hung in the airless space of my mind. I shook my head, a violent, jerky motion. No, you're not. I'm going crazy. Gas leak. Something. It's not real. Not real? The voice was laced with something like pity. I cooked you dinner, don't you remember? The macaroni. The way Mom used to make it. I was trying to help you. To remind you. But you just threw it away. The memory of the perfectly cooked pasta flashed in my mind. The knife. The smile in the video. The silhouette in the doorway. It was all one thing. It was this. This voice. I turned on the camera for you, it continued, its tone patient, like a teacher explaining a simple concept to a difficult child. I wanted you to see. I wanted you to understand. But you're too stupid. You always have been. You set up a trap for me, in our own home. You tried to hunt me down. Me. The one who has been keeping us safe. The one who cleans up your messes. The air in my lungs turned to ice. It wasn't a gas leak. It wasn't a breakdown. This was a conversation. My sanctuary hadn't just become a cell. My own mind had become a cage, and the bars were closing in. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. Where do you run when the thing you're running from is wearing your skin? Who are you? I whispered, the words trembling. I'm the one who gets things done, the voice said, its power growing, no longer a whisper but a clear, resonant thought that vibrated through my bones. I'm the one who isn't afraid, while you were curled up in a ball, drowning in your own pity. I was making a plan. I was taking control, something you haven't been able to do for years. My body trembled. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Every word it spoke dismantled my reality, brick by painful brick. You want to see whose house this really is? The voice purred. You want to meet the man in charge? Stop cowering on the floor like a dog. The voice issued a command. Simple. Direct. Absolute. Look in the mirror. I didn't move. My muscles were locked. The full-length mirror was screwed to the back of my closet door, not 10 feet away. In the dark, it was just a rectangle of deeper black. But I knew it was there. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the marrow, that I did not want to see my reflection. Get up, the voice commanded, sharper now. Look. In. The show. Mirror. A force that wasn't my own pulled at my limbs. My body began to move, clumsy and jerky, a puppet on strings. I pushed myself up from the floor, my legs shaking. Each step was an act of war against my own will. I shuffled past the foot of the bed. Past my desk. The floorboards creaked under my weight. I stood before the closet door, before the mirror. I couldn't see anything. Just a faint, vaguely human shape in the deep gloom, outlined by the thin sliver of light from under the bedroom door. It was me, a shadow. I could feel my own heart beating, my own chest rising and falling. I stared for a long, silent moment. Nothing happened. A tiny fragment of relief, fragile as glass, began to form in my chest. See? I thought, a desperate plea to myself. It's just you. It's just a reflection. And then the reflection smiled. It was a slow, widening curve of the lips in the darkness. A predator's smile. My own lips remained still, pressed together in a thin line of terror. My control was gone. My body was a statue, but the man in the glass was alive. It straightened its posture, standing taller than I felt. It tilted its head, a gesture of curiosity. Its lips moved, and this time a voice spoke. Not in my head. From the mirror. A real sound cutting through the air in the room. "Hello, Ethan." My name. It spoke my name. My own mouth didn't move. The sound came from the glass, from the thing that looked like me but wasn't me. It had stepped out of my head and into the world. The last wall had crumbled. I stared, my mind shattered into a million pieces. The face in the mirror, my face, looked at me with an expression of calm, confident ownership. It was looking at me the way you look at a piece of property. "There now," the reflection said, its voice smooth and reassuring. "That wasn't so hard, was it? It's good to finally meet you. Properly." I tried to scream, but only a choked gagging sound escaped my throat. I stumbled backward, away from the thing wearing my face. My heel caught on the rug and I fell, hitting the floor hard. I scrambled backward, crab walking away from the closet, my eyes locked on the smiling man in the mirror. He just watched me, that serene, terrible smile never leaving his face. He had won. Click. The sound came from the bedroom door, the sound of the lock turning. Disengaging. My head snapped toward the door. The sound was impossible. It couldn't be. The thing was in the mirror. It was in my head. It couldn't be on the other side of the door. My terror-stricken mind latched onto a new, even more horrifying idea. There were two of them. Pushing myself up, I lurched toward the door. My hand, shaking violently, closed around the doorknob. It felt different now. Solid, connected. I turned it slowly. The latch retracted. I pulled the door open. I peered out into the hallway. Empty. The light from the living room was on, just as it had been. The apartment was still. Silent. I stepped out, my eyes darting everywhere. I looked toward the front door. It was closed and chained. I looked at the floor where I had set up the camera. The little black cube was there, unplugged, its cord lying limp beside it. Everything was just as I had left it. There was no one there. There never had been. The silhouette in the doorway, the friendly wave, the hand that turned the key. It was never on the other side of the door. It was on my side the whole time. I stumbled into the hallway, a ghost in my own home. My bare feet were numb against the floorboards. The air was still. Too still. I pivoted, my eyes scanning the living room, a frantic search for something wrong, for something out of place that wasn't just in my head. A broken window. A jimmied lock. Anything to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The front door was chained. The deadbolt was thrown. Just as I had left it. It was impossible. He couldn't have gotten out. He couldn't have gotten in. Unless he was an expert. A professional who could bypass a lock, taunt his victim, and then slip out, relocking the door from the outside, as if he were a phantom. Yes. That had to be it. It was a person. A real, flesh and blood person playing a sick game. My mind clung to that thought like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. It was the only explanation that kept me sane. The voice in my head, the face in the mirror, my mind snapping under the stress. A hallucination brought on by terror. It had to be. My gaze fell on the coffee table. My breath caught in my throat. The photo album. It was still there, lying open. I had slammed it shut. I knew I had. But there it was, open to a specific page. I crept closer, my legs shaking so badly I had to brace myself against the arm of the sofa. I looked down at the picture. Me. I must have been 5 or 6. Crying my eyes out, face red and puffy, clutching a teddy bear with one ear missing. My mom knelt in front of me, her arms wrapped around my small shoulders. I remembered that day. I had fallen off my bike, scraped my knee, and thought the world was ending. I remembered the warmth of her hug. I remembered her voice, soft and soothing. "It's okay, Ethan. It's okay. Mommy's here." But that wasn't the voice I heard in my memory now. As the image solidified in my mind, her voice warped. It stretched, deepened, twisting into a grotesque electronic drawl. The voice from my head. The voice from the mirror. Shh. It's okay. The corrupted memory voice buzzed in my skull. A parasite latched onto something pure. They all get what they deserve in the end. He'll get what he deserves. I recoiled from the table, a strangled noise escaping my lips. I clutched my head, my knuckles white. No, I whispered. No, 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 it wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't stress. This was a violation. It was rewriting my life, poisoning the past. Then the dam broke. It wasn't one memory. It was a flood. A torrent of broken images and sensations, crashing into me, drowning me. They weren't my memories. They were his. And he was showing me what he had done. A flash. I am standing in front of the bathroom mirror, the same one I'd stared into just hours ago, looking for some trap. My hand, his hand, is holding a tube of Amy's red lipstick. I can feel the waxy stickiness as I uncap it. I can smell the faint, flowery scent. His fingers are steady. I watch, a helpless passenger in my own body, as my hand raises to the glass. Slowly, deliberately, I write the words. I see you. Another flash. I am sitting on my own couch, in this very spot. My phone is in my hand. My thumbs fly across the screen, typing the texts that had terrified me. Each word is chosen with care. Each threat crafted for maximum impact. A cold, detached sense of satisfaction flows through me as I press send. The satisfaction of a craftsman admiring his work. I see myself, the other me, smile a little as he imagines the fear on my face when I read it. You need a little push, the voice whispered in the memory, pleased with itself. You're too soft. Too weak. Flash. The smart speaker on the kitchen counter. I am leaning over it, my mouth close to the microphone. I am making the sounds myself. A low, guttural whisper. The sound of nails scraping against wood. I record them, loop them, set a timer. He knew exactly when I would be in the living room. He knew exactly how to time it. He was the puppet master, and I was the puppet, and he was pulling my strings from inside my own body. He wasn't hacking my things. He was just using them. They were his things too. In every one of these fragmented visions, I saw the world through my own eyes, but the man looking out was a stranger. He was sharp, focused, and filled with a cold, simmering rage I didn't recognize. He moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. He saw my life, my apartment, my relationships, with a contemptuous glare. He saw my weakness, my self-pity, my quiet desperation, and he hated it. He hated me. He was an infection, a usurper who had been biding his time, living in the shadows of my mind, and now he was taking over. The final memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was the clearest one yet. The most terrible. I am not in my apartment. I am standing in the apartment upstairs. Mrs. Gable's old place. It's empty. The furniture is gone, covered in white sheets, casting long, strange shapes in the dim light from the street. It smells of dust and time. In my hand, his hand, is a basketball, one I'd kept in the back of my closet since college. I can feel the pebbled leather of the ball. I can feel the cold air of the vacant apartment on my skin. He takes a deep breath, a performer stepping onto a stage, and then he begins to bounce the ball. Thump! The sound is loud in the empty space, a dull, heavy impact that echoes off the bare walls. Thump! It's slow, methodical, a steady, rhythmic beat. Right above my living room ceiling, right above where I would be sitting, trying to watch TV, trying to ignore the noise. Thump! I am watching myself do it. I am filled with a sickening understanding. The noise I'd complained about for weeks, the noise that drove me crazy that I'd blamed on new neighbors, it was him. It was me. He had been sneaking upstairs to this empty apartment just to torment me, to poke and prod the weak, pathetic Ethan downstairs, to see how much it would take to make him crack. Thump! And in the memory, he smirks. A wide, cruel smirk of utter dominance. He enjoys it. He enjoys my frustration. He enjoys my misery. He bounces the ball, a steady, maddening thump, 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 and he starts to laugh. Not a loud laugh, a quiet, breathy chuckle that uses my lungs, my vocal cords. A laugh that says, "This is my house. These are my toys. And you are my favorite toy of all." The memory shattered. I was back in my living room. The strength fled from my body. My knees buckled and I crashed to the floor, my hands flying to my head as if I could physically hold the pieces of my mind together. A low, animal moan tore from my throat. It was me. It was all me, the stalker, the intruder, the monster. There was no one to fight. There was no one to run from. How do you escape a prison when the prison is your own skull? My body convulsed with a dry heave. I lay on the rug, curled in a ball, the world spinning around me. The silence of the apartment was no longer just silence. It was the silence of the other one, the man in charge, watching me break. He was here now, in control. He had locked me in my room to show me, to teach me a lesson. And now he was letting me see the truth of his work. My eyes, wild and unfocused, darted around the room. They snagged on something in the corner, tucked away on the highest shelf of the bookcase, almost hidden behind a stack of old paperbacks. The small black cube of the camera I had set up. I had placed it there to catch an intruder, to get proof, to show the world I wasn't crazy. My heart stopped. On the front of the tiny device, a single point of light glowed with a steady, malevolent intensity. A small, red light. It was on. It was recording. It had recorded everything. My body was a machine with stripped gears. It tried to move, to scramble away, but nothing responded. I lay on the floor, twisted into a knot of flesh and bone, my cheek pressed against the rough fibers of the rug. The only thing that worked were my eyes. They were fixed, locked on that tiny red light in the corner. It blinked. No, it didn't blink. It glowed, a pinprick of crimson judgment in the shadows of the bookshelf. On. Recording. It saw me. It saw my breakdown. It saw the pieces of me shatter on this floor. And it had seen him. It had seen everything. A new command, cold and clear, cut through the fog of panic. See it. The thought wasn't my own. It didn't feel like the frantic, scared Ethan. It was sharp, inescapable, a mandate. My limbs obeyed. I pushed myself up, my joints screaming. My movements were stiff, robotic, like a marionette being pulled by unseen strings. I walked to the bookcase. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost knocked a stack of paperbacks over as I reached for the camera. The plastic was cool and smooth in my palm. An artifact from a crime scene. My crime scene. I didn't let myself think. Thinking was a trap. Thinking was where he lived. I just acted. I carried the small black cube to my laptop on the coffee table, the same table where the photo album lay open, a poisoned memory. I ignored it. I fumbled with the USB cable, my fingers thick and clumsy. The first attempt, I tried to jam it in upside down. A low, frustrated growl escaped my throat. I flipped it. It slid into the port with a soft click. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent apartment. My laptop chimed, recognizing the new device. A window popped up. One folder. One file inside. A random string of numbers for a name. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My hand hovered over the trackpad, my index finger trembling. This was it. The last door. The truth was on the other side. A truth I already knew but needed to see. A truth that would probably destroy what little was left of me. I clicked. The video player opened. The screen was black for a second. Then it filled with my own face. It was me. The real me. The me from yesterday? A lifetime ago. My face was a mask of strained hope and exhaustion. I saw myself fidgeting with the camera's position, angling it just so, making sure it covered the living room and the hallway entrance. I looked directly into the lens, my own eyes staring back at me from the screen. They were wide, scared, pleading. "Please catch him," they seemed to say. "Please prove I'm not crazy." A wave of pity for that man washed over me. He had no idea. No idea the enemy wasn't outside the door. I couldn't watch my pathetic fumbling. I pressed my finger on the trackpad, dragging the progress bar forward. The video blurred into a fast-forwarded stream of light and shadow as day turned to night outside the window. Hours compressed into seconds. A silent, frantic movie of an empty room. I let go. The video snapped back to normal speed. The room was dark, lit only by the faint orange glow of the streetlights outside. It was quiet. Utterly, completely quiet. I watched, my own breathing hitched in my throat. I was watching my empty apartment, waiting for a ghost to appear. Waiting for myself to appear. Then, a flicker of movement. My bedroom door creaked open. I leaned closer to the screen, my nose almost touching it. A figure stepped out of the darkness. It was my body. My clothes, the same gray sweatpants and black t-shirt I was wearing now. My face. But it wasn't me. It wasn't the scared, hopeful man who set up the camera. It wasn't the broken wreck currently staring at the screen. This man moved with a liquid confidence. His shoulders were back, his steps were silent, deliberate. He wasn't scared in his own home, he owned it. He stood in the middle of the living room, his head tilted slightly, as if listening. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. My lips. My stomach churned. I watched, a horrified spectator, as this other me started his performance. He walked over to the coat closet near the front door. He didn't need anything from it. He just opened the door, slow enough for the old hinges to let out a long, drawn-out groan, the same sound that had made my blood run cold countless times. Then he closed it with a soft click. A sound test. He was a composer of fear, and this apartment was his instrument. He turned his head. His eyes, my eyes, found the camera's lens in the darkness. The little red light must have been visible to him. He knew it was there. He had to know. The smile on his face widened. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a sneer of pure, unadulterated contempt. A victor's smile. He looked right at me, right through the screen, and I felt pinned to my chair. He held my gaze for a long, terrible moment, and then he let out a soft, breathy chuckle. The same hideous laugh from the memory. I wanted to slam the laptop shut. I wanted to throw it against the wall. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed. My captor was forcing me to watch his victory lap. The man on the screen, the stranger wearing my skin, turned away from the camera. He started walking. He wasn't sneaking or hiding. He strolled. He paced the length of the apartment, from the kitchen to the living room window, his footsteps even, and measured. He was an actor on a stage, and he was reveling in his role. He paused by the kitchen counter, picking up a single glass from the drying rack. He held it up to the light, inspecting it. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he let it drop to the floor. The sound of shattering glass, tinny through the laptop speakers, made me jump. It was the sound I'd heard while locked in my room, the sound I had attributed to a violent intruder. But on screen, there was no violence. There was only calm, calculated action. He looked down at the mess of shards on the tile, a craftsman admiring his work. Just enough noise, his posture seemed to say. Just enough to make him panic. Then came the part one knew was coming. The part my soul was screaming for me not to see. He walked toward my bedroom door. The door I had cowered behind. The door I had thought was my only safe place. He stood before it for a moment, his back to the camera. I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was preparing for the final act. He turned his head again. A quick, sharp glance back at the camera. A final check. Are you watching? Are you paying attention? Good. Then he reached into the pocket of my sweatpants. No. The word was a choked whisper in my throat. He pulled out the keychain. My keychain. The one with the silver E my mom gave me for my 21st birthday. The keys rattled softly in the silence, the sound impossibly loud. He selected one key, the one for my bedroom door lock. He inserted it into the keyhole from the outside. My breath stopped. The world narrowed to that screen, to the image of my own hand turning my own key in my own door, locking me inside. I watched him turn the key. A firm, decisive click. Then he reached up and slid the deadbolt across. A heavy, final thunk. He had locked me in. He had staged the entire thing. The terror. The helplessness. The desperate calls to 911 that he knew would go unanswered because he was already gone. He had created the prison, thrown me inside, and then sat back to watch me scream. The text messages. The noises. The face in the mirror. It was all him. A sick, elaborate stage play with an audience of one. Me. The twist wasn't that the killer was inside the house. The twist was that the killer was the house. He was the keys, the phone, the speakers, the man in the mirror. He was me. On the screen, his work was done. He stood back from the locked door, a sense of finality in his posture. He had shown me what he had done in my memories, and now he was showing me the proof. Undeniable. Irrefutable. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a separate entity. He was a part of me. The stronger part. The part in charge. I felt a scream building in my chest, a raw, animal sound of pure agony. My mind was a car crash. The metal and glass of my sanity were strewn across the pavement. But before the scream could escape, he did one last thing. He turned, slowly, and faced the camera one final time. He walked toward it until his face filled the entire frame. His eyes were wide, clear, and terrifyingly intelligent. There was no rage in them now, no contempt, just a cold, quiet instruction. He looked directly at me, the broken man he knew would be watching this exact moment. He knew. He had planned for this. This video wasn't just evidence, it was a message. A lesson. He slowly raised his hand. He pressed his index finger to his lips. Shh. The screen erupted into a blizzard of black and white static. The audio cut to a loud, harsh hiss. He had turned it off. His final message delivered. I stared at the static, at the dancing snow on the screen. The only sound in the room was the hiss from the speakers and the frantic, useless pounding of my own heart. He was here. He was in control. And he had just told me to be quiet. This was his show now. And I was just along for the ride. The hiss of the static filled the world. It was the only sound. A waterfall of noise from the tiny laptop speakers, washing away thought, washing away everything. I didn't move. My hands were still on the edge of the coffee table, my knuckles white. I was a statue, frozen in the exact moment my universe had collapsed. He turned it off. He planned this. He knew I would watch, and he left me a final, silent command. Shh! My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic prisoner beating on the bars of its cage. The static was a snake, coiling in my ears. I had to make it stop. My hand, moving like it belonged to someone else, reached out and snapped the laptop shut. Silence. It was worse. 1,000 times worse. The quiet was a physical presence. Oh, wait. It pressed in on me from all sides. In the silence, I could feel him. Not as a separate person, not as an intruder. As a hum beneath my own skin. A low-frequency vibration in my bones. He was the victor. And my body was his trophy. I pushed myself up. My joints creaked in protest. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I stood, my legs unsteady. Where do you go when the monster isn't just in the house, but in your head? Where do you run? Riding drum. There was only one place to see the enemy. My feet carried me out of the living room, past the kitchen where he had smashed the glass, past the hallway closet where he had orchestrated the sounds that made me lose my mind. Each step was a pilgrimage through a landscape of my own fear, a tour of the stage he had built. My hand found the cool metal of the bathroom doorknob. It turned. The latch clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo in the dead air. I stepped inside. The room was small, tiled and white. The air was cool. I didn't turn on the main light. The faint vanity light above the mirror was already on, casting a soft, unforgiving glow. My target was the mirror. A simple rectangle of silvered glass hanging above the sink. I needed to see him. I needed to look him in the eye. My legs were jelly. I gripped the edges of the porcelain sink to hold myself up. My knuckles were pale against the white. I kept my head down, my gaze fixed on the drain. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and fast. A part of me, the small, terrified part that was still me, didn't want to look up. It knew that what I would see would be the end. But I had to. Slowly, I lifted my head. My eyes met my own in the mirror. It was just me. My face was pale, streaked with sweat. My hair was a mess. My eyes were wide, bloodshot, the pupils blown wide with terror. It was the face of a man who had been through hell, a victim, nothing more. There was no cold confidence, no victor's smirk. Just me, Ethan, scared, broken Ethan. A breath I didn't know I was holding escaped my lips in a shudder. My shoulders sagged. The tension in my neck eased by a fraction. It was just a video, a deepfake, a hack. It had to be. Maybe I was having a breakdown, a psychotic episode. Maybe I was hallucinating everything. That was better. Crazy was better than this. Crazy I could get help for. Crazy could be fixed. It was just my imagination, I thought. The words were a prayer. A desperate, flimsy shield against the truth. I'm just losing my mind. I stared at my reflection, searching for any sign, any flicker of the other man. Nothing. Just my own pathetic, frightened face. I almost laughed. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. I kept my eyes locked on the mirror. My reflection stared back, his expression a perfect match for my own dawning, fragile hope. My head was bowed slightly, catching my breath. And then his head lifted. My own head was still down. I was still looking up from under my brow. But in the mirror, the man wearing my face straightened his neck. He looked directly forward, his posture changing from defeated to dominant in a single, fluid motion. The world stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I was pinned by the sight. It was happening again, but there was no camera, no screen. Just me and him, separated by a thin sheet of glass. His expression shifted. The fear in his eyes, my eyes, evaporated. It was replaced by a look of cold amusement. A faint smile touched his lips, my lips. A voice slid into my mind. It didn't come through my ears. It bloomed directly in the center of my brain, as clear and sharp as a shard of ice. Did you like the play? The voice was mine, but it was not my own. It had a resonance, a power that I had never possessed. It was the voice of the man from the video, the composer, the director, the star. I tried to speak, but my throat was closed. A gagging sound was all that came out. My hands gripped the sink so hard I thought the porcelain would crack. I thought the ending was particularly effective, the voice continued, calm and conversational. His image in the mirror tilted its head, a gesture of mock contemplation. The shushing. A nice little artistic touch, don't you think? A reminder of the new rules. Why? The word ripped itself from my throat, a raw, shredded sound. It wasn't a question. It was a scream, a plea. Why? The reflection's smile widened. It was not a pleasant sight. It was all teeth. Why? The voice in my head was laced with something that sounded like pity. You're asking the wrong question, Ethan. You should be asking why not. Look at you. Even now, cowering, whimpering. You've been doing it your whole life. His image leaned closer to the glass, and I felt an irrational urge to recoil, as if he could pass right through it. You let the boss walk all over you at work, he said, his eyes in the mirror narrowing. You let Sarah leave without a fight because you were too scared to tell her what you really wanted. You sit in this apartment and let the world happen to you. A punching bag. A doormat. You are weak. A flaw in the design. My mind was reeling. He was pulling out my deepest insecurities, my most private failures, and laying them bare. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I'm not. But you are, he interrupted, his mental voice sharp as a razor. And I am the correction. The upgrade. I'm the part of you that knows how to survive. When that kid pushed you down in 3rd grade, I was the one who wanted to pick up a rock. You were the one who cried and ran to the teacher. When that guy cut you off in traffic yesterday, I was the one who wanted to follow him home. You were the one who just honked the horn and complained about it for an hour. He was twisting everything, taking every dark impulse, every fleeting, angry thought I'd ever had, and claiming it as his own. He was the anger, the aggression. The part one had spent my entire life suppressing. I am the one who acts, he concluded, his voice ringing with a terrifying finality. You are the one who hesitates. The world doesn't reward hesitation. It crushes it. I built this stage, this whole little horror show, for one reason. To make you see. To make you finally understand that I am the one who should be in control. I am the survivor. The confrontation I never knew I needed was here. In a bathroom mirror, I was face to face with my own darkness, and it was telling me it was better than me. Stronger, more worthy of living. The terror that had been my constant companion for days was curdling into something else, a hot, furious rage. You're a monster, I spat, my voice shaking. The reflection laughed. This time I heard it. A soft, breathy chuckle that was both in my head and in the air around me. No, I'm a realist. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, the contempt in his eyes softened into something else, something that almost resembled sympathy. It was the most disturbing thing I had seen yet. But the lesson is over now, he said, his tone shifting. It was no longer lecturing. It was conclusive. You know the truth. You've seen the proof. There's no need for all this anymore. No need for the games. No need for the fear. He paused. His smile faded, replaced by a look of serene calm. There's no need for two of us. My blood ran cold. What does that mean? His reflection smiled again, but this time it was a different smile. It wasn't a sneer. It wasn't a threat. It was genuine. Peaceful even. It means it's time to stop fighting, he said. It's time to just be. He raised his hand in the mirror. I watched, mesmerized, as he slowly brought it toward his face. My own hands remained clenched on the sink. He placed his fingertips on his temple in the reflection. Now there's just one, the voice whispered, softer now, a final soothing note. The one who gets things done. And as he said it, his face began to change. The confidence, the power, the cold intelligence, it all seemed to drain away. The lines of tension around his eyes and mouth softened. His expression became neutral, blank. He was becoming me again. No, not me. My own face, the one of flesh and blood, was changing too. The terror drained out of my eyes. The frantic panic that had been screaming in my head for an eternity simply stopped. The grip on the sink loosened. My ragged breathing evened out, becoming slow and deep. The frantic hammering in my chest slowed to a steady, rhythmic beat. I watched as the man in the mirror became a perfect reflection again. His face was my face. His expression was my expression, a mask of complete and total calm. The war was over, and I had lost. Or maybe I had won. I stood there for a long moment, looking at my new face in the mirror. The world was quiet. My mind was clear. For the first time in as long as I could remember, there was no fear. There was no doubt. There was only certainty. It was time to clean up the broken glass in the kitchen. Sunlight cut across the floorboards, sharp and clean. My eyes opened. No crust. No blur. The world was in high definition. I took a breath, a full, deep breath that filled my lungs all the way to the bottom. The air tasted new. I sat up. The bed sheets were twisted into a damp rope, soaked with old sweat. His sweat. Not mine. The frantic animal terror of the man who went to sleep in this bed was gone. It had been scrubbed from my system. The knot in my stomach, the one he had carried for years, had been untied. My body felt light. My muscles were loose, relaxed. The frantic drumming in my head was gone, replaced by a steady, quiet hum. The hum of a perfectly running machine. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My feet touched the floor. They were steady. I stood up. No dizziness, no weakness. I stretched my arms above my head, fingers reaching for the ceiling. My spine popped. A series of clean, satisfying clicks. A system reboot. My gaze fell on the bathroom door, the scene of the final lesson, the mirror. I walked toward it, my steps even and silent. I didn't turn on the light. The morning sun filtering through the bedroom window was enough. I leaned over the sink, the same sink his hands had gripped like a dying man. I looked up. The man in the mirror looked back. His face was pale, but the blotchy fear was gone. His eyes were clear, the pupils a normal size. There was a clarity there, an intelligence that had been clouded by years of anxiety. He, the man in the glass, and I, the man of flesh, were one. The war was over. The integration was complete. A faint smile touched my lips. The reflection smile matched it perfectly. There was no lag, no dissonance, just a perfect, silent understanding. I turned and walked out of the bathroom, leaving him behind. The living room was a disaster, a monument to his weakness. The coffee table was overturned. A lamp lay on its side, the shade bent. Shards of a broken water glass glittered on the hardwood floor like fallen stars. A map of last night's panic. I surveyed the chaos, not with dismay, but with a kind of detached curiosity. An archaeologist studying the ruins of a failed civilization. It was an ugly display, uncontrolled, inefficient. A tantrum. A small smile touched my lips. Cute, but messy. Time to clean up. My bare feet stepped onto the hardwood. They crunched on the fine glass shards. A sharp, grinding sound. It didn't hurt. I felt the pressure, the tiny points digging into my heel. But the signal of pain never reached my brain. It was just data. I noted it and moved on. There was work to do. I went to the kitchen. My movements were fluid, economical. I found the dustpan and brush under the sink. I returned to the living room and began sweeping up the glass. The scrape of the plastic bristles on the wood was a grating, rhythmic sound. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The tiny, glittering pieces collected in a neat pile. I swept them into the dustpan. The sound was satisfying. Order being restored, I dumped the glass into the kitchen trash. The clatter it made was final. Next, the lamp. I picked it up. The metal base was cold. The shade was hopelessly bent. I paused, holding it. A flicker of a memory tried to surface. Him, buying this lamp with Sarah. Arguing playfully about whether it was too modern. A ghost of an emotion. A warmth that wasn't mine. I examined the feeling for a second, like a scientist looking at a cell under a microscope. It was useless. A relic. I walked back to the kitchen and forced the lamp into the trash can, bending the metal frame until it fit. The noise was loud. The coffee table was next. It was heavy. I gripped one end, bent my knees, and lifted with my legs. No strain. I righted it with a solid thud. I ran my hand over the surface, wiping away a dusty footprint. My eyes fell on the laptop. It sat on the floor where he had left it, snapped shut. The stage for the grand finale, the tool of his re-education. I picked it up. It felt cool and inert in my hands. I placed it on the newly righted table and opened the lid. The screen flickered to life. The desktop was a mess. A clutter of his useless files, unfinished projects, folders labeled with nonsense. I didn't need to see the video again. I knew the script. I wrote it. My fingers moved over the trackpad. I selected everything, every document, every picture, every shortcut. A blue haze covered the screen. I dragged the entire digital history of Ethan Miller to the trash can icon in the corner. I didn't hesitate. I clicked. Are you sure you want to permanently delete these items? I almost laughed. I clicked yes. A small progress bar appeared. It filled quickly. A digital lobotomy, clean, a fresh start. I spent the next hour cleaning. I wiped down every surface. I vacuumed the rug, the steady drone of the machine, a calming mantra. I took out the trash. I straightened the books on the shelf. Each action was precise. I was a stranger here, a professional cleaner hired to erase any trace of the previous tenant. The apartment was a crime scene. I was tidying up, removing the evidence of him. As I was dusting the bookshelf, my fingers brushed against a worn, leather-bound book, a photo album. His memories. I pulled it down. The leather was soft, cracked with age. I sat on the couch, the vacuum cleaner cooling in the corner, and opened it. The first page was him as a baby, a chubby, crying thing in a blue blanket. I felt nothing. I turned the page. Him on a tricycle, grinning a toothy gap. Page after page of a life I had observed from the inside, a life of scraped knees, awkward school photos, and forced smiles at family gatherings. It was like watching a movie about someone I'd never met. I kept turning. My finger stopped on a picture near the end. A woman with my eyes. His mother. She was younger here, standing in a garden, her hand raised to shield her eyes from the sun. She was smiling. A genuine, unburdened smile. I stared at the photo. A feeling should have been there. Warmth. Sadness. Loss. A phantom limb of an emotion. A neurological echo. I waited for it. Probed for it. But there was nothing. A blank space. A server with a deleted file. The data was gone. She was just a woman in a photograph. A stranger. My thumb pressed down on her smiling face. The glossy paper was smooth. I held it there for a moment, then I closed the cover. The sound was soft. Final. I stood up. I walked to the hall closet, opened the door, and reached up to the highest shelf. Behind a stack of old towels and a winter blanket, I pushed the album into the darkness. Out of sight. Unnecessary baggage. The apartment was clean now. Spotless. The morning light filled it, reflecting off the polished wood floors. It looked like a model home. Impersonal. Unlived in. Perfect. I went into the bathroom. I turned on the shower. The water was hot, steaming up the room. I stripped off his clothes, the ones he'd worn for 2 days, and dropped them in a pile on the floor. I stepped into the hot spray. The water washed away the last traces of his grime, his sweat, his fear. I washed my hair. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I was purifying the vessel, baptizing it. When I stepped out wrapped in a clean towel, I felt powerful, renewed. I looked at myself in the steamed-up mirror. I wiped a clear circle with my hand. The man inside looked back. Calm, confident, in control. We were in agreement. I got dressed, not in his usual worn jeans and faded t-shirt. I opened his closet and pushed past the clutter. In the back, I found it. A dark gray suit he'd bought for a wedding 2 years ago and never worn since. He thought it made him look like an imposter. I thought it looked appropriate. The shirt was crisp. The tie was a dark, simple silk. The fit was perfect. I was born to wear this. I was adjusting the knot on my tie when my phone rang. The sound was sharp in the quiet apartment. It vibrated on the nightstand. I walked over and looked at the screen. Richards. Work. His boss. A man who walked all over him. A man he complained about constantly but never stood up to. I let it ring twice more. A small test of power. Then, I picked it up. I pressed the green icon. Hello? My voice was different. Deeper. Firmer. It didn't waver. It filled the space. On the other end, Richards's reedy, impatient voice crackled. Ethan, where the hell are you? You missed the morning brief. The quarterly reports are due, and your section is a complete mess. I need you in here now. I was silent for a moment, listening to his pathetic, blustering tone. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. People looked like ants. So small. So busy. Ethan? Did you hear me? Richards demanded. I took a slow breath. Yes, I said. My tone was level. Cold. I heard you. Well, what's the excuse this time? I smiled. A real smile this time. It felt good. There is no excuse, I said, and don't speak to me in that tone of voice again. Silence on the other end. Complete, stunned silence. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his little head. What did you just say to me? he finally stammered. You heard me, I said, still watching the city below. As for the reports, they will be on your desk by the end of the day. They will be perfect. From now on, you will not call me outside of my contracted work hours unless the building is on fire. Is that understood? More silence. I could feel his shock and confusion through the phone. It was intoxicating. I didn't let him finish. Good, I said and hung up. I placed the phone on the table. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. It was mine. I smoothed the lapels of my suit. I checked my reflection one last time in the dark screen of the TV. The man looking back was a stranger. A better version. A survivor. I looked out the window. The sun was climbing higher. The city was waking up, a complex machine of needs and desires. A playground. So many possibilities. So many things to fix. So many people to correct. A new day. My day. Habia X, Shreyas Liali, Das Pa Urix.